Yo guys, welcome to the Zelda fiction. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Fem Sasuke? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Jiraiya grimaced as he slowly rose to his feet, still clutching his privates. Damn kid. What the hell did I do to you to earn that kind of reaction? You know damn well what you did, you perverted asshole. You're my goddamn godfather, and you neglected your duties to me and my parents because you'd rather peep on women in the hot springs. Why the fuck would I want to spend any length of time with somebody like you? Naruto growled out. The white-haired man sighed and said, look kid, I'm sorry. I had things to take care of and I couldn't spare the time to sit down for a meet and greet. I had a spy network to run, issues that needed to be taken care of, and I've been trying to get dirt on Danzo and the elders so sensei can finally deal with those sons of bitches. You have to understand. I don't want to hear it. You're a self-proclaimed super pervert and you feel your research is far more important than checking in on me to make sure I was well taken care of. You could have easily spared some damn time to let me know somebody fucking cared. Maybe even given me a few tips or teach me something, but you never did. My parents would be ashamed of you. Naruto said, never losing his glare. Jiraiya frowned and said, look, I did the best. Did the best you could. I know. You and the Hokage insist on using that particular excuse. Why are you even here now? Did you really think I'd just forgive you like nothing was wrong in the first place? Naruto questioned. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I just wanted to meet you and see how you've been doing. From what I've been able to gather, Kakashi wasn't exactly much of a sensei. So I was hoping to give you some proper teaching. And before you ask, I can teach you this, for one thing. Jiraiya said as he formed a Rasengan in his hand. This is one of your father's jutsu, the Rasengan. It's pretty much yours by birthright. I had hoped Kakashi would have taught it to you, but that was obviously too much to ask from that bastard. Sasuke nodded her head and said, I have to agree. Kakashi hasn't been much of a sensei to the team. I don't mind that he focused on me, but the problem was that he didn't do anything to help Naruto. And Sakura. Ugh. Kakashi failed us as a sensei. Tenten frowned at this as she looked between all of them. You were telling the truth about him then? I thought it was an exaggeration. What kind of sensei neglects his students like that? At least Guy Sensei tries to help all of us, even though Niji's stubborn as hell and refuses his training approach most of the time. Naruto, as if just noticing Tenten, looked from her to Jiraiya and asked, did you remove the seal on Ten-chan? Is she better now? The Toad Sage nodded and smiled at his godson. Yes, I did. She wanted to meet you and ask you some rather personal questions. So what do you say you let us in and we chat for a while? I'd like to teach you, and if you'd like, I'll even teach your friends. I want to at least try and make everything up to you. Before Naruto could say anything, Kurama walked up to the group and turned his gaze from Jiraiya to Naruto. Accept his offer, Naruto. We'll work out a proper schedule for you and your friends to learn from us both properly. For now, he's right. We should sit down and chat for a while. The blonde sighed heavily and nodded reluctantly. Very well. Come in everybody. He said as he led them inside his home. Once inside, he and Karen set about preparing tea and snacks for everybody. Upon finishing and placing the tea set down, Naruto looked at Tenten for a time before asking, Ten-chan. What exactly did you want to know? Kurama sighed and said, Kit, you already know what she's going to ask. You might as well just tell her. Nodding once in understanding, the whiskered team began to explain. You want to know why I'm so hated, especially to the point your parents did what they did to make you forget about me. Looking at Kurama at this point, he said, Tenten, I'm a Jinchuriki. There are 9 of us in total. We each have one of the Bijuu sealed inside of us. Gaara, for instance, holds the Ichibi. Yujito houses the Nibi. Bu holds Hinanabi. Then there's me, I house the Kyuubi. Looking back into her eyes, he said, the people of Konoha hate me because I'm a constant reminder of what they've lost. They've abused me in various ways and have even tried to kill me at points. Your parents didn't want you associating with me precisely because I'm a monster in their eyes. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I was meant to be alone and suffer throughout my life. That's how the people feel. Tenten's eyes widened and she said, but that's not fair to you. You didn't ask to be made a Jinchuriki. What happened back then isn't your fault. How can people think like that? It makes no sense. Jiraiya sighed and spoke up, deciding to explain. It's how things work. The people create the Jinchuriki and then treat them like shit because they're different. Despite the fact that they created the Jinchuriki, they still behave in such a way. It makes no sense, and yet that's how the world works. A lot of places treat Jinchuriki as if they're nothing more than weapons. They're not people with hearts and souls, they're simply meant to be obedient weapons. That's how Danzo Shimura thinks, and if he had his way, Naruto would be a mindless tool to be disposed of when he was no longer useful to him. Tenten scowled at this and asked, and Hokage-sama hasn't gotten rid of Danzo because? Jiraiya scowled as well and said, Sensei's afraid to act against him for fear of what his supporters might do. The other elders and the members of the civilian council all favor Danzo and his way of thinking. If Sensei were to make a move without sufficient evidence, not only could it backfire and be used against him, but Danzo could escape and plot against the village. I've been trying to get the evidence required to bury that asshole, but I haven't made much progress. If Sensei doesn't do something soon, then I'll just kill Danzo myself and the elders too if I have to. I refuse to let them harm my godson any further. I'd do it if I felt I was strong enough. Tenten said, clenching her fists angrily. Anyways, looking into Naruto's eyes, she asked, can we spend some time together? I want to get to know you better and learn about you. We used to be best friends, and I'd like to rekindle that friendship with you. I'd love to help you in your training, but considering we both made it to the finals. I understand. It's fine. But are you sure you don't want to train under these two as well? It might help. Plus, the company would be nice. I've really missed you, Tenten-chan. Naruto said, blushing slightly at having to admit such a thing. The brunette blushed slightly and said, I'm glad to see you again too, Naruto-kun. And, if you really don't mind training together despite the disadvantage we'd be at against each other, I'll do it. It might be nice training together, after all. I just hope your senseis don't take it easy on me because I'm a girl. Kurama simply smirked devilishly at her and said, I'm not taking it easy on anyone. Sasuke, Karen, Kin. Am I taking it easy on you? Karen looked directly into Tenten's eyes and said, trust me, he's a slave driver. But I can tell we're going to get stronger and stronger. Right, Kurama-sensei? The QB smirked and nodded his head. Correct. Looking at Jiraiya, he said, I hope you weren't planning to take it easy on them either, Jiraiya of the Sannin. I plan to train them into the ground and build them back up again. Over and over again, until they're at a level I'm pleased with. And even then, I'll continue to torture them until they're strong enough to challenge the world. Jiraiya grinned at that and said, you know what? I like the sound of that. Sure, let's make them into the best damn shinobi they can be, and then some. Nobody will be able to stop them. Naruto started to giggle somewhat nervously and said, before we start on that though, there's something you two need to know. Tenten asked, what's that, Naruto-kun? The blonde motioned towards Kurama and said simply, me Kurama, the QB no Yoko. We key and I've asked him for training so we could handle anything, even the invasion that Orochimaru is planning. And yes, we know about it. Not entirely sure what to do about it, but… Jiraiya and Tenten simply stared at Kurama for a moment before Jiraiya said, well, can't say I was expecting that. Looking forward to working with you. Tenten just stared goggle-eyed at the QB before she nodded slowly in acceptance. Okay then. I'm looking forward to learning under you, Kurama-sensei. She said, bowing her head to him. Kurama took a sip of his tea, despite being only a shadow clone at the moment, and said, by the time we're finished with you, you'll be able to kill the likes of Orochimaru and Itachi Uchiha, should you ever need to. That's a promise. Looking forward to it, Kurama-sensei. Naruto said with a grin on his face. Our opponents won't know what hit him. 1 week later. Naruto and the others had today off to rest and relax. Jiraiya and Kurama had both insisted that they would need to take a day or two off every now and again to rest and recuperate after how hard they've been training. After all, too much training can be just as bad as too little training. However, Naruto and the others got the feeling that the two of them were up to something big and wanted to take the time to handle whatever it was before they continued with the training. Pushing that thought aside for the time being, Naruto decided to focus on his date with Kintsuchi. They had started out with a nice walk through the village, simply holding hands and chatting with one another. They had tuned out the villagers and chose to ignore the hateful looks and jeers. Naturally, this upset a great number of the villagers, but it wasn't like they could do anything unless they wanted to die. Now, Kin and her date were sitting in the dango shop, enjoying a nice meal of, what else, dango. This is so good. Kin said as she savored the taste of the dumpling. I never got to have these back in Odo. Naruto smiled at her before popping one of the dumplings into his mouth, chewing it for a while and savoring the taste. After swallowing, he said, they are delicious, aren't they? I'm glad you're enjoying them, Kin-chan. Well, of course she is. Dango's the absolute best treat out there. So delicious. So fulfilling. So wonderful. Anko exclaimed as she sat down beside Naruto, throwing her arm around him. Suo, on a date with your friend, Shouldn't you be training for the finals, Mr. Uzumaki? Pia Anko-chan. Naruto said with a small smile on his face. Yes, we're on a date. And I have been training. My sensei said I needed a day or two off, so I decided to spend time with Kin-chan. What have you been up to? Oh, you know, the usual. Torturing scumbags, eating the most delicious food out there, planning for Orochimaru's invasion. She whispered in his ear. Be careful of the Ichibi and Nibi Jinchuriki. The Nanabi's fine, but those two are dangerous. We believe that they're the big guns for the invasion. The Raikage's had some interesting dealings lately, or at least that's the information Jiraiya's spy network has picked up. We already know for a fact that Suna's allied with Orochimaru for the invasion. If you fight them, take them down swiftly and don't give them a chance to rise up again. Even if that means you have to kill them to do it. Do you understand me, Naru-kun? Nodding his head in understanding, he said, with all the training I'm getting, I'll be ready, Anko-chan. I don't care how hard a fight it is, if it means I can protect my precious people, I'll do whatever it takes to win. I won't lose to the likes of them. Patting him on the cheek, Anko kissed his forehead before she stood up and left without a word. As soon as she was gone, Kin frowned at her date and asked, what was all that about? Are you dating her too? Naruto shook his head and said, no, we're just really good friends. Besides, I think she's got a boyfriend or something. Not entirely sure. And she was telling me about you-know-what. Numbers 1 and 2 are involved. Eyes widening, Kin nodded and said, I'll help however I can, Naruto-kun. Count on it. Thanks, Kin-chan. For now, let's eat and then head to the park. It'll be nice to just sit and relax together, don't you think? Kin smiled and nodded happily. She was more than happy to just be near Naruto right now. She just hoped nothing happened to ruin their date. Kurama. Kurama grinned ferociously as he tore apart another root agent. He and Jiraiya had infiltrated Danzo's lair and were systematically destroying his root forces and taking everything of interest, such as evidence showing just what kinds of monstrous things he had been up to. At the moment, he and Jiraiya could both sense Danzo and 3 of his agents up ahead. Why the old warhawk wasn't trying to escape confused and worried them. Knowing him, he was confident that whatever trick he had up his sleeve would do the trick in eliminating them. Tearing apart one last root agent, Kurama motioned for Jiraiya to wait. Send in a shadow clone. I don't like this one bit. He whispered to the toad sage. Jiraiya nodded and created 2 shadow clones, one of which transformed into Kurama. Afterwards, they entered the room while the real Kurama and Jiraiya listened from their hiding places. You were foolish to come here, Jiraiya. And you, I don't know who you are, but your friend has led you right into a trap. How sad. Danzo said as he attempted to use his implanted Sharingan to influence the Kurama shadow clone. When it didn't work, he blinked a couple of times and asked, what sorcery is this? Nobody can resist the power of Kodomatsukami. Just what the hell are you? It was at this point that the shadow clones moved. Jiraiya's went after the youngest one, a boy named Sai. Meanwhile, the Kurama clone assaulted both of Danzo's bodyguards, Fuyamanaka and Torunobu Rami. While Sai was taken down easily enough, as he was still young and inexperienced, the Kurama clone was having difficulties battling the duo. Deciding enough was enough, Danzo unveiled his grotesque arm with all the implanted Sharingan. I don't know who you are or how you two found this place, but you'll both die here. And with that, he entered the fray. The 2 shadow clones managed to kill Fu, but Torun's blasted insects were proving to be a problem. In fact, it was so bad that both shadow clones were dispelled, unable to fight any longer against the overwhelming assault. As soon as they were both gone, Danzo's eyes widened in realization. Shadow clones. Damn it. I wasted it on a damn shadow clone. He exclaimed angrily. It was at this moment that Jiraiya and Kurama slipped into the room, unnoticed by the duo. Kurama quickly decapitated Torun, not even giving him a chance to continue attacking with those blasted bugs of his. Meanwhile, Jiraiya had engaged Danzo in combat, dodging his wind-based jutsu, hitting Danzo where it hurt, and even snapping the man's neck. However, when he appeared a moment later behind Kurama, Jiraiya narrowed his eyes in suspicion. After a moment, it dawned on him. It's those blasted Sharingan in his arm. We need to either remove the arm or destroy those eyes. Kurama nodded before blocking an attack from behind. Afterwards, he spun around and slammed a flaming fist into Danzo's face, incinerating his head. When Danzo simply reappeared elsewhere in the room with a smirk on his face, Kurama simply sighed. Staring at him with a bored expression on his face, the QB clone asked, is that it? Is this really all you're capable of, Danzo Shimura? For all your bravado, for all your precious cunning, you're just a one-trick pony. How pathetic. Danzo scowled for a moment and opened his mouth, preparing to go into one long tirade. However, the moment he did, he felt a stinging sensation in his arm. Looking down, he saw a bunch of razor-thin needles protruding from each of the Sharingan in his arm. Scowling angrily at Jiraiya, he realized that he had used that blasted needle Jizo, combined with needle hell to attack him while he was distracted. You will pay for your transgressions against me, the both of you. I am a god. I was meant to rule this world. If I can't have what I want, then I'll simply have to settle for taking you two down with me. He exclaimed as he prepared to activate the seal on his chest. Kurama, seeing this, quickly flashed through hand seals before appearing behind Danzo, slamming his clawed hand into the old man's back. Destruction claw. He exclaimed, his vile chakra eating away at Danzo until all that was left was bones and goop on the floor. Good riddance, you pile of filth. Jiraiya breathed a sigh of relief before he looked around the room they were in. Let's get what we came here for and then pay a visit to sensei. It's high time he put the councils and those elders in their place. I'm definitely looking forward to this. Kurama smirked devilishly and said, it should be entertaining to watch. I'll be sure to bring the popcorn. Sounds like a plan to me. Jiraiya said with a chuckle. Naruto. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he laid on the grass beside Kin, staring up at the birds flying in the sky and trying to determine what each cloud reminded them of. They were holding hands and simply enjoying one another's presence. I really like you, Naruto-kun. You've got to be the sweetest person I've ever met. Thank you for being who you are. Kin said before she turned and kissed him on the cheek. Seeing him blush, she couldn't help but giggle a bit. You're welcome, Kin-chan. So long as you're happy, I'm happy. It's really nice spending time with you like this. Naruto said, smiling happily at her. Sadly, all good things must come to an end at some point. In this case, it was in the form of one Kiba Inyazuka. The Inyazuka clansman laughed darkly as he came into their field of vision. What the hell is this? Another pathetic whore willing to spread her legs for the likes of you? Why don't you girls get with a real man instead, huh? We could go for a hell of a ride. Then again, I don't think I want the idiot sloppy seconds. As Kin turned red with rage, Naruto sighed and stood up, looking calmly into Kiba's eyes. A real man, huh? Wow, so big and tough. Especially for someone who was too afraid to fight his opponent in the prelims. For a supposed real man, you're awfully pathetic. Do tell me, Mudface, which one of us made it through to the finals? Oh wait, I remember, it's me. You know something that I can't help but find amusing, Kiba. The girl you're really after, Hinata-chan. She'll never touch you. Too dirty. Too disgusting. No, her love and adoration are reserved for me and me alone. And by the way, at least she was brave enough to fight and overcome her opponent. For all your bravado, you're just a sniveling, pathetic little puppy. Kiba's face turned a dark red from how angry he was. No, angry was too light a word. He was furious, enraged, incensed, you feel free to pick a term. As he prepared to attack Naruto, he heard the jingle of a couple of bells, but paid it no mind. Instead, he went to punch Naruto, only to somehow miss. Wobbling a bit, he couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with him. Then he heard it again, the sound of bells. Shaking it off, he decided to simply ignore the annoying sound and continue trying to attack Naruto, only for the blonde's visage to suddenly twist and warp before it disappeared completely. Completely disoriented at this point, he collapsed to his knees and felt his consciousness slowly fading. Then, he suddenly felt his pants falling down, or were they being taken off? He couldn't figure it out. The last thing he felt before the bliss of unconsciousness overtook him was the feeling of two needle-like objects piercing his balls. He wanted to scream out in pain, but it was at this point that he passed out, unable to take any more. Thankfully for Akamaru, he had passed out atop Kiba's head long before this, as a result of the powerful genjutsu. Once he was finally unconscious, Kin grinned viciously and proceeded to remove any chance of Kiba passing on his genes to the next generation. Using her knowledge on human anatomy and the like, she proceeded to render Kiba sterile and unable to get a girl pregnant, should one ever willingly touch him. Once she had finished, Naruto helped her replace Kiba's pants. We should probably get out of here now. Naruto suggested as he began to lead Kin away from Kiba's unconscious form. As they walked away, he asked, "Are you okay, Kin-chan?" Kin took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. Without a word, she turned, grabbed both sides of Naruto's face, and kissed him passionately. Afterwards, she smiled contentedly and said, "Suo much better now. I don't like being called a fucking whore. I'm proud of the fact that, despite everything I had to put up with in Orochimaru's service, I protected my virginity from those assholes. I refuse to be called a whore." Hugging her close, Naruto suppressed his blush and said, "It's okay, Kin-chan. Kiba's just an asshole. Don't let what he says get to you, okay?" Feeling her nod against his chest, he began to gently comb his fingers through her long, beautiful hair. "Why don't we go home and cuddle for a little while? Would that help?" Kin nodded happily and said, "Definitely. You'd better not try to back out of it now, Naruto-kun." Chuckling softly, Naruto held her close as they made their way back towards their shared home. He had to admit that despite Kiba being an asshole, they had had an interesting and enjoyable date. And ending it with cuddling was just wonderful. If only he knew just how she wanted to cuddle. Hokage's office. Hirazen's eyes widened at all the evidence this unknown stranger and his old student had gathered from Danzo's base of operations. Looking into Jiraiya's eyes, he asked, "Just what is all of this, Jiraiya? And who is this person?" Jiraiya pointed at the stack of files and other such documents sitting on the Hokage's desk. That is everything you could ever want to nail Danzo for every crime he's ever committed. But since we killed Danzo, you can now use it to deal with your old teammates and the civilian council as you see fit. You may not have been willing to go against Danzo, but the two of us. We just don't care about his precious butt buddies on the council. It was time to take charge and kill the son of a bitch. As for who this is, well, his name's Kurama. But more importantly, he's also known as the QB no Yoko. And before you say anything, Naruto's fine. Kurama's been a big help in training the kid and he's actually a pretty good guy once you get to know him. Hiruzen blinked a couple of times from the shock of it all, but soon nodded his head. I see. Well then, putting all of that aside, it will take a bit of time to sort through everything here. But I don't see why we can't take the fight directly to the council right now. Even if I don't know everything that's in these files, we can still make use of their presence to make those bastards sweat. I think it's high time they pay the price for their crimes, just as Danzo had to. Jiraiya shook his head and tapped a few fingers against the files. That's too risky right now. Put your focus on reading through all these files. Make use of your shadow clones to get it done faster. Once you understand the contents of these documents, then call a council meeting. You'll need all the knowledge on Danzo's dealings as you can get if you want to have any chance of putting those assholes in their place. Blinking after a moment, Jiraiya looked at his sensei quizzically. Actually, now that I think on it, why haven't you been using shadow clones to speed up your work? You do remember that their knowledge and whatever they do, see, hear, etc. is transferred back to you, right? Eyes widening at the information, Hiruzen soon began to cry comically. I'm so stupid. Jiraiya and Kurama simply sweat dropped at this. Without a word being said, the two of them left Hiruzen to his own devices. For the time being, they wanted to get some rest and do their own thing for a few days before they resumed training Naruto and the others. Naruto was currently a blushing mess as he laid cuddled up with Kin. When they entered his home and proceeded to his bedroom, she had immediately stripped down to her bra and panties, which were incredibly arousing to look at, and ordered him to strip as well. So now, here he was, dressed in only his boxers, cuddling with Kin. At some point, Kin had fallen asleep and was now breathing peacefully with a content smile on her face. Meanwhile, he was a blushing mess who was trying very, very hard to will a certain problem away. How am I supposed to fall asleep like this? I've got a really hot girl lying half naked next to me and I can't get my damn boner to go down. What the hell am I supposed to do? Sighing, he turned over on his side and looked into her peacefully sleeping face. Smiling, he brushed a few of her bangs out of her face and whispered, "You're beautiful, Kin-chan." Seeing her smile in her sleep, he figured she must have heard him and unconsciously reacted to that. Then, he found himself looking down at her breasts. Despite his better instincts screaming at him not to do it, he began to trail his hand from her shoulder, slowly down her arm, and then against her side and belly. Her skin was so soft that he couldn't help but admire her toned, yet slim body. She had obviously trained hard and ate well to get a body like this. Then his hand slowly started to move upwards towards one of her breasts. Seeing what he was doing, he quickly retracted his hand and turned over again, blushing fiercely. Damn it. I need to control myself better. I almost touched her breast without thinking about it. What would she have done if I had? Oh Kami, I can't deal with this. What do I do? Behind him, the black-haired Kunoichi couldn't help but smirk to herself. Just a little more and I could have teased him a bit. Oh Naruto-kun, you are far too innocent. I'll make sure to corrupt you soon enough, just you wait. 1 week later. Sasuke frowned as she stood outside of her old compound, staring in at the desolate place. She had brought Naruto with her to help her look over some things and hopefully move some stuff into her new home with Naruto. However, the moment she made to step across the threshold into the Uchiha compound, 2 citizens stepped up and blocked their way. Glaring at them, she said, "Move." One of the men simply scoffed and shoved her into Naruto. Not a chance, girlie. We're not about to let some demon and his horde desecrate the great Uchiha-sama's home. I suggest you leave before things get violent. The raven-haired girl glared fiercely at them and shouted, "I am Sasuke, damn it. This is my home. Now get the fuck out of my way." Hearing this caused both men to laugh before the second one went to backhand Sasuke. However, he blinked when Naruto caught him by the wrist and started putting pressure on it. "The hell do you think you're doing, demon? Release me at once or the council will be on your ass faster than." Before the man could continue, Naruto snapped his wrist up, breaking it before he kicked him in the knee so hard he damn near shattered his kneecap. Afterwards, he glared at the other man and said, "This is Sasuke, you idiots. And she told you to get the hell out of her way. Now leave." The first man tried to punch Naruto, only for Sasuke to leap up and kick him in the side of the head, sending him crashing to the ground. Afterwards, she leapt upon him and began to slam her fist into his face over and over again. She would have ended up killing him had it not been for Naruto. Pulling Sasuke away from both men, Naruto looked her in the eyes and asked, "Sasuke, are you okay? I know it's hard, but..." Breathing heavily, Sasuke soon turned and prepared to walk into her compound. "I'm fine, Naruto. Just really pissed off. And I feel weird. And I'm bleeding, Harem down there. I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm so pissed off and I want to break things. I'm really confused and very frustrated and I just do not know what to do. Why the hell do girls have to bleed down there? It's so confusing." Naruto blushed badly and simply said, I don't know why. But it sounds like you're having your harem period. You really have fully turned into a woman. I don't think there's any going back to being a man at this rate. Holy crap." Realizing what she had just told Naruto, Sasuke found herself blushing furiously. Storming away from him into her compound, she blinked when she and Naruto were suddenly stopped by an Anbu. "Now what?" she demanded angrily. The Anbu looked her calmly in the eyes and said, "Hokage-sama requests your presence. Both of you." Sasuke sighed and asked, "Can it wait for just a little while? I want to get some of my things moved from the compound to Naruto's place before some looter or something steals anything." The Anbu frowned and thought for a moment before he looked at Naruto. "Teach her the shadow clone technique. You can use your shadow clones to pack everything you need. The Hokage cannot be kept waiting for much longer." Naruto nodded in understanding before he took Sasuke off to the side. Taking the time to explain the jutsu to her, he showed her the hand seal and focused his chakra before creating 3 shadow clones. Nodding her head in understanding, Sasuke proceeded to practice it for a time, testing how much chakra would be needed to form just one of these clones. After a time, she summoned forth a single shadow clone and smiled. "Thank you, Naruto. Alright, I want you and Naruto's clones to go through the compound, find everything of value and pack it up into these storage scrolls. I want everything moved back into our new home before we're finished with our meeting. Don't dilly-dally." Each of the clones nodded before they set out to collect everything. Afterwards, the duo walked up to the Anbu once again and allowed him to take them straight to the Hokage's office. Once they had arrived, Sasuke looked into the old man's eyes and asked, "Are we in trouble, Hokage-sama?" Hiruzen smiled and shook his head. "Not at all. I just realized that it's time we announce what's happened to you to the village. One of my Anbu reported what happened to me and I don't want the same thing to happen again and again. That, and I can't have you beating people to death for trying to bar you entry into your home all the time," he said with a chuckle. Blushing in embarrassment, Sasuke muttered, "Sorry. I just can't seem to control myself right now." The Hokage simply smiled at her before he motioned for them to follow him. "I already informed my Anbu to gather the villagers. I just hope they take the big reveal well and don't panic. Or start a riot. Either of those would be very bad right now. It's a good thing I've already dealt with the assholes on the council, otherwise they'd very likely screw all of this up somehow, in some way." Naruto looked at the Hokage curiously. "That's right, Kurama-sensei did say you had what you needed to deal with them finally. How'd that go?" Hiruzen looked into Naruto's eyes and said, "Long story short. My old teammates are set to be executed for their hand in Danzo's crimes. And I've disbanded the civilian council. No longer will they have any hand in shinobi affairs. Things are running so much smoother now." "Glad to hear it," Naruto said as they walked along through the crowded streets. People had gathered all around, foreigners and local citizens alike. Pushing their way through, they soon stopped in the center of the village on a raised platform. "Citizens and guests alike, I'm going to keep this short and to the point. Something happened to the Sasuke Uchiha you know and love. During the second stage of the exams, Team 7 came under attack by Orochimaru of the Sannin. As a direct result of their encounter and a seal placed upon him, Sasuke has been transformed, in a sense. If you look beside me, you'll see a charming young woman. This is Sasuke Uchiha. He has become a woman in every sense of the word. I know this may come as a shock to all of you, but I want you to continue treating her well. She is having a hard time adjusting to her new body and her current situation. Try to show her your support as you did when she was a he. And just so all of you know, she has moved in with Naruto Uzumaki. I will not have you calling the women staying with Naruto demon whores or anything of the like. I plan to announce something important to you all after the exams are over and everyone visiting Konohagakure has gone home. Treat them with respect. If I hear about anyone mistreating Naruto and those living with him, I will have you executed. There will be no exceptions and nobody to protect you. That is all. You may go about your business again." Hiruzen explained before he walked off, leaving Naruto and Sasuke to deal with a barrage of questions and shouts of denial and outrage. Sighing to himself, Naruto looked at Sasuke and shrugged. "Well, what do you want to do now? Everyone knows you're a girl now. One good thing about this is you won't have to worry about fangirls anymore. Bad news. Guys are bound to start hitting on you. Groaning, the Uchiha palmed her face and said, I really don't want to think about that right now, Naruto. Let's just go home and get some training in. I need to relieve some stress. And I'm still trying to figure out how to put on a damn bra. Well, they support these big things, she said, lifting up her breasts with her hands, they're still kind of uncomfortable. And is it bad that I miss my beep? Blushing slightly, Naruto scratched at his cheek and said, nah. If I was in your shoes, I'd probably be feeling the same way. Just give it some time and you'll get used to it, Sasuke. I know that's not what you want to hear, but you're a bona fide girl now, and I don't think there's any way to change you back. Rather than fight it, it might be better for you to try and get used to the changes. Though I can't do anything to help you with the bodily functions females have. Maybe ask Karen for some advice. Because you don't want all your underwear to get ruined because you're bleeding like crazy down there. Sasuke blushed furiously, but nodded her head in understanding. You're right. It's really awkward to think about having to use those feminine products. But you're right, I don't want all my Okami, this is embarrassing. I don't want all my damn panties to be ruined. Freaking hell. Naruto didn't even try to say anything. Instead he just continued walking with her back towards their shared home. He would let Karen and Kin help his friend because there was no way in hell he was going to go shopping with her for feminine hygiene products. Day of the finals. As Naruto stood amidst the competitors in the arena, he couldn't help but think about everything that had happened during the month. Overall, he had to admit that he had greatly enjoyed the past month. He was finally getting the kind of training he really needed, and he even had a few girlfriends now that he was definitely looking forward to getting to know better. Plus, he had grown closer to Sasuke in a weird way. Hiruzen had also done what he could to try and make up for his mistakes, but he still wasn't sure how to feel about the old Kage. Jiraiya, on the other hand. He hadn't quite forgiven him for his neglect, but at least he was putting forth a serious effort now to make everything better for him, so he couldn't really complain. The others had been growing stronger as a result of the training as well, so he was pleased. Another thing that caused him to smile was the fact that he and Tenten had actually gone on a date at one point just a few days ago. It was a simple affair, just enjoying walking around and chatting with one another before stopping at Yakiniku-Q for a bite to eat. Tenten had admitted that she wasn't exactly a girly girl, but Naruto had assured her that he liked her the way she was. At the end of their date, she had kissed him on the cheek, causing the both of them to blush deeply before she ran off towards home. Thinking about that brought his mind to Tenten's parents. They had both been locked away with their chakra sealed. There was no chance for them to ever be set free. Tenten was now living on her own, and he had considered posing the option of moving in with him to her, but had decided against it for the time being. He wasn't sure how she'd feel about it if he asked her such a thing so soon after her parents were imprisoned. After a moment, his thoughts moved towards his other girlfriends. Karen and Kin. Ever since the day they cuddled together, Kin had been making it a point to sneak in at night and cuddle up to him in the same state of undress as she had that day. When Karen found out about this, she started to do the same exact thing, only she made sure not to wear a bra. Poor Naruto wasn't sure what to say or do in these situations, but he also found that he couldn't really complain. It was a good life. Naruto's thoughts then drifted to Kiba, and he found himself chuckling a bit. The idiot still walked around, claiming himself to be an alpha male, still with the same big ego. And yet, he remained clueless to the fact that he was now sterile. Whenever Kiba saw him, usually when he was on a date, the mud had taken to trying to harass him, only to be ignored or shoved aside without a care in the world. At one point, Kiba had tried to attack Naruto for daring to disrespect him, so Naruto proceeded to break Kiba's right arm, then his nose, and finally his left leg. He was tired of dealing with Kiba's crap. Then, just to add insult to injury, Naruto told Kiba that he might just ask Hinata out and take her on a date right in front of him, just to rub it in that he never stood a chance with the girl of his dreams. Was this mean of him? Perhaps even spiteful. Yes, but he didn't care anymore. His thoughts were derailed when the proctor cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. Alright, just so you remember the order and who you're up against, here's the deal. Genma said as he showed them the chart, reminding them of who was facing whom in each match. Once they understood, he said, the rules are the same as in the prelims. You fight until there's a clear victor. I can stop the match at any time. Killing is permissible, but it's highly frowned upon. And when I say stop the fight, you stop the fight. Understand? Everyone nodded in understanding. Everyone turned to the Hokage as he began to speak. Naruto couldn't help but notice the other Kages watching Hiruzen, some of them with barely concealed glee. Frowning deeply, he realized that they were likely in on the invasion plan and were more than likely going to kill the Hokage if given the chance. Damn it. I may no be his biggest fan, but it's not like I want him to die. Jiraiya, Kurama, I hope you two can do something. When the Hokage's speech ended, Genma said, alright. Will everyone except Naruto, Uzumaki and Temari leave the arena? After everyone left, Naruto looked into Tamari's eyes and smirked at her. I really don't want to hurt that pretty face of yours, Tamari-chan. So, out of respect for you, I'm going to make this offer once before we begin. Please forfeit. The pigtailed blonde frowned and lifted her iron fan into her hands, preparing to do combat. Sorry, but I have no intention of just giving up like that. I don't care how much stronger you've become, there's no way you can win. Naruto chuckled darkly and said, funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Such a shame. After a few moments, Genma announced the start of the match before leaping away. As Tamari went on the attack, Naruto simply grinned fiercely and said, bring it on. The moment Tamari attacked with her wind technique, Naruto disappeared from his spot, easily avoiding the attack. Upon seeing his speed, the wind specialist's eyes widened and she quickly turned, using her now closed fan to block a punch from behind. When he simply disappeared again, she muttered a curse underneath her breath before jumping away from her current location. She barely managed to avoid a punch from her opponent, but the ground wasn't so lucky. The moment Naruto's fist hit the ground, a small crater was carved into the ground, shocking not just Tamari but the audience as well. Standing straight again, Naruto popped his neck to get out a few uncomfortable kinks. Popping his knuckles as well, he smirked at Tamari and said quietly, just loud enough for Tamari and Genma to hear, if you're smart, you'll forfeit this match to me now. Your invasion plan won't succeed. I may have said I wouldn't do anything to stop you, but I have loved ones here and I would really rather they not get hurt because of your actions. Besides that, I really don't want to hurt you. You're too pretty to let some scratches, burns, or whatever else might happen to you. Blushing slightly at the compliment, Tamari soon shook it off and said, I can't just give up now, Naruto. I may not agree with my father's plan, but… Naruto shook his head sadly and said, that man up there is not your father, Tamari-chan. You see, my godfather looked into it and your father was found dead. We believe Orochimaru killed him and took his place, just so he'd have an easier shot at getting to Hokage-sama. Please, Tamari-chan, help me convince your people not to go through with this attack. It's not too late. Eyes wide, the Suna Genin looked up at her father for a moment, almost as if she was trying to get a read on the man. After a time, she looked back at her opponent and shook her head. You say that but there's no turning back from this now. My people need me. The Wind Daimyo is giving most of our missions to Konohagakure. We're suffering as a result of his idiocy. Please try to understand, Naruto. Shaking his head in disappointment, Naruto said, I'm sorry you feel that way. I would have preferred it if we could work out some kind of arrangement and convince the daimyo to giving your village missions again. Try to fix things, you know. As much as I dislike the man, Hokage-sama can be a reasonable person. Working out some kind of agreement wouldn't be impossible or even improbable. But, I can see you're not going to just give this foolish notion to bed. So, I apologize for what I have to do. Tamari blinked in confusion, but the moment she opened her eyes again, Naruto was mere inches from her. Letting out an eep. She tried to back away, only to suddenly feel his fist buried in her gut. Doubling over, she coughed and gasped for breath. Strong. Naruto frowned as he proceeded to land blow after blow upon his opponent until she could no longer stand. Once he was finished, he watched as her body stilled as she drifted into blissful unconsciousness. Glancing towards the proctor, he saw Genma nod to him before exclaiming, winner of the first match. Naruto Uzumaki. Nodding at the man in turn, Naruto proceeded to leave the field while medics rushed out to collect the beaten and bruised Tamari. That should keep her out of commission for a while. She won't wake up until after the invasion. Even if she does awaken, she'll be in too much pain to do anything about it. I just hope she can forgive me for what I have to do. In the stands. In and Karen whooped and hollered as their shared boyfriend was announced the winner of the first match. Oh sure, they knew without a doubt that he'd win the fight, but it was still exciting to see him really kick some ass down there. Sasuke was sitting in between the two of them, a small smile on her face. Good job Naruto. Sadly, they did have some unwelcome guests sitting close to them. Sakura, Ino, and Kiba in particular. The other rookies were there as well, or at least the ones that had failed to make it through the preliminary matches. How the hell did the idiot win? Kiba questioned. There's no way he should have won that fight. Hearing this, Kin scoffed and turned to face him. Naruto-kun trained really hard for this. He's not about to lose to anybody. So do us all a favor and shut up, would you? Sakura frowned deeply and said, but he was never this fast or strong before. He couldn't ever do anything right. He was a complete hopeless idiot. None of this makes any sense. Perrin glared at Sakura and said, wow. It's nice to know you think so highly of your teammate. Do tell me, who was it that rescued your sorry ass in the forest of death? He didn't do it just once, he saved you twice. Sakura scowled at having that reminder thrown in her face. That doesn't change anything. Sasuke-kun could have easily handled everything if Naruto wasn't there. Sasuke, having enough of their bullshit, stood up and turned to face them, her Sharingan blazing. I am so sick and tired of you and your attitudes. All of you. Naruto is far stronger and far better than the lot of you. He saved my life and defeated opponents I couldn't. I trained with him all month long, and I can safely say that Naruto's a lot stronger than you idiots give him credit for. Besides that, he's my best friend and I'm tired of people badmouthing him like this or treating him like the plague. I was lonely, so damn lonely, living alone in my clan's compound. Every day was a reminder of what happened and how I lost everything. Naruto invited me into his home. He allowed me to move into his home when he didn't have to. He could have left me to suffer alone and he didn't. And Sasuke began to shake, anger and sadness visible in her eyes. Karen and Kin took her hands before Karen said, "It's okay, Sasuke. You've said enough. Let's just ignore them and watch the matches, okay?" Kin nodded in agreement. What she said. We don't need to bother with them if they're only going to badmouth Naruto-kun. Clenching and unclenching her fists for a time, Sasuke eventually nodded and took her seat once again. She was angry, she was upset, and she wanted nothing more than to beat the shit out of those that chose to badmouth her dearest friend. Meanwhile, a few rows back, Anko was seated with Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai. They had heard everything that had been said by the genin in front of them. Sighing, Kakashi palmed his face and said, they really need to watch what they say before somebody hurts them for it. Anko smirked and said, I dunno. I like how Sasuke snapped at them. It was kinda fun to watch. Kurenai laughed for a moment before saying, indeed. I think Naruto did a fine job. It's just a shame that our genin can't accept Naruto's growth. Asuma nodded and said, those three in particular are quite the problem. We're really going to need to correct their mindsets when it comes to Naruto. Besides that, I think it's time we put them through the torture from hell. Anko grinned and said, sounds great to me. I'll gladly help should you need it. Looking down at the now vacant field, she smiled to herself. You've done a fine job, Naruto-kun. Kage Booth. Hiruzen couldn't help it as a smile spread across his features. Good job, Naruto-kun. I just hope they don't start the invasion until you've managed to take out at least one of their Jinchuriki. We can't risk letting them unleash their Biju on the village. Beside him, the Kazekage, who was actually Orochimaru in disguise, was seething. That little runt had taken down one of the key figures in his invasion plan. Sure, she wouldn't have made for much of a frontline fighter, but she would have been able to get Gaara where Orochimaru needed him to be. Damn that boy. He is constantly getting in my way. First in the forest of death, then he convinced Kin to turn traitor, and now this. Just how strong is this runt? Beside him, the large man known as the Raikage of Kumagakure couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Careful Kazekage, we can all feel your killing intent. Might want to rein it in a bit. Calming himself, Orochimaru glanced at A and said, my apologies. I didn't mean to alarm anyone. I'm just shocked that my daughter lost so easily. Hiruzen smirked as he looked at the Kazekage. You're not fooling anyone with that disguise, Orochimaru. Soon enough, you'll get what's coming to you. I guarantee it. But Tsuchikage, a man by the name of Inoki, frowned as he watched Naruto leave the field. Without turning his eyes away from the boy, he asked, that boy, could he really be his son? How come I never heard about him having a child? Hiruzen turned his gaze towards Inoki and smiled disarmingly at him. You are correct in your assumption, old friend. Is there a problem with that? But Tsuchikage shook his head and looked squarely into Hiruzen's eyes. None at all. I have no problem with the man, nor do I see any reason to hate the son. Some of my people would love nothing more than to kill him, but I have no intention of telling them about Uzumaki-san down there. Live and let live, as they say. The Hokage smiled at Inoki before he returned his gaze to the field. Thank you. Now, I do believe it is time for the second match. Suzumabachi vs Amoy. As Suzumabachi took the field, standing across from her opponent, she couldn't help but frown irritably to herself. This is going to be tough, but I think I can beat this guy. I've trained hard for this, and all I need is one beat to reach him to win this fight. If I can nail him with even more, that'll snag the win for me for sure. Amoy frowned as he looked at his opponent. It was obvious that she had some kind of plan, but he wasn't going to make it easy for her. He had trained the entire month just to make sure he could beat at least this one girl. Yes, he probably should have focused more on preparing for every potential opponent he could face, just in case he managed to win this first fight, but he didn't care. All I have to do is show Raikage-sama that I'm worthy of a promotion. If I can just win this fight. Genma looked between the two combatants and, upon seeing they were both ready, shouted, begin. Before getting the hell out of the way. Immediately, Suzumabachi called forth an army of bees and sent them flying towards her opponent. She didn't expect this attack to work, but they were still an essential part of her plan. When Amoy channeled lightning chakra through his blade and began cutting down her bees expertly, she couldn't help but grin. Amoy's eyes widened as the field began to become coated in honey. Some of it had even landed on him, and his blade was soaked with it as well. It was sticky and he was having a hard time moving his arms where he was splashed by her attack. Damn it. Think Amoy. You've trained for this. The Kumo swordsman took a deep breath to steady his nerves. After he had calmed somewhat, he turned and cut down another swarm of bees, leaping backwards every time he cut down a swarm of them, just to ensure he wouldn't become ensnared by the blasted honey. However, when he dodged for the 5th time, he ended up slipping on the honey that had coated the ground. Amoy grimaced as he struggled to stand upright. He kept trying to pry himself free of the puddle of honey, but he was having very little luck. Shit. He cursed again and again in his head. It was at this point that Suzumabachi said, "You put up a good fight, Amoy-san. But I'm afraid you were just outmatched this time. Bees, do your thing." Amoy blinked as he felt something prick the back of his neck. After a matter of seconds, he began to feel woozy and could barely stay standing. It was when he felt 3 more pricks that he came to the realization that she had won. Damn, it was his last thought as he collapsed unconscious to the ground. "Winner. Suzumabachi," Genma announced before he called for a cleanup crew to deal with all the honey. Amoy, meanwhile, was carried off by the medics so he could be taken care of properly. The Iwa Genin let out a sigh of relief as she turned and began making her way back to the contestants' waiting area. Once she arrived, she looked at her next opponent with a smile. "Hello there, Naruto Uzumaki. I'm looking forward to our match." The blonde grinned at her and said, "Me too. You fought well down there. Congratulations on your victory." "Thank you," she said. After a moment, she glanced around before looking into Naruto's eyes again. "Can we talk in private for a moment? I want to confirm something." Frowning slightly, Naruto nodded before he walked off with his next opponent. Once they were alone, he asked, "What's up, Suzu-san?" Turning to look into his eyes, she asked, "You're the son of the 4th Hokage, aren't you?" Seeing no point in denying it, Naruto nodded his head and said, "Yes. I am. Though I'm not too sure how to feel about my father. And before you ask, I can't tell you right now. No telling who could be listening in on our conversation." "Why do you ask, though?" Suzumabachi looked him over from head to toe before she peered into his eyes. "Your father was trying to form a peace treaty with my village. A way to cease potential conflict with one another and even become friends. Our villages would have worked together for a change, rather than constantly going to war with one another." Glancing away for a moment, a small blush adorned her face. "The problem is, though, that he and Tsuchikage-sama decided that, in order to seal the deal, so to speak. Naruto frowned for a moment as he tried to figure out what she was trying to tell him. After a few minutes, however, it dawned on him. "Oh. So, you and me?" The Iwa Kunoichi nodded and blushed as she looked anywhere but at him. "So, you see the problem?" "Well, not that it's a problem, but..." Naruto chuckled softly and placed his hands on her shoulders, making her look him in the eyes. "Suzu-san, it's okay. We've only just met. There's no need to try and rush into anything. Especially if either of us are uncomfortable about it. I think, before we decide on anything, we should start out as friends." "Okay. Besides, I have 3 wonderful girlfriends right now. That might make you a bit uncomfortable, so..." Suzumabachi giggled a bit and shook her head. "That doesn't really bother me. But you're right, we have only just met each other. I think starting off as friends would be nice. But..." "I know," Naruto said before chuckling for a moment. "Tsuchikage-sama would likely try to push things through, wouldn't he? I think Hokage-sama would as well." Suzumabachi giggled a bit more and nodded her head. "I don't think they'd take no as an answer. So, as awkward as it might be, I think you're stuck with me. You don't have a problem with that, do you, Naruto-kun?" she teased. Looking into her eyes, Naruto blushed a bit at the sultry look she was giving him. Glancing away, he scratched the tip of his nose and said, "Not really. It'll be nice to hang out and spend some time together. Nobody's saying we have to rush into a relationship right away, after all. Although, what if you meet somebody else you like?" The Iwa Kunoichi frowned sadly at this and shook her head. "Naruto-kun, look at me." Naruto looked into her eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" Suzumabachi moved her hands up and down, making him follow her movements. As he did, he got a good look at her body and her face, unsure what she wanted. Seeing his confusion, she said, "Naruto-kun, I'm not exactly attractive. Most guys look at me and think I'm just some tomboy or that I'm ugly. Some even comment on my forehead and make fun of me for it. Even other girls make fun of me for my appearance. On top of that, my breasts aren't as large as other girls and my butt's not that great to look at either. To other people, I'm completely unattractive. So there is nobody else, Naruto-kun." The blonde frowned for a time as he looked her over again. "I don't see anything wrong with you. I don't mean to sound like a pervert here, but you need to hear this. Suzu-chan, your breasts suit you just fine, and there's still plenty of growing for us both to do, so anything can happen. For me, it's not about how big your breasts are or how great your ass might be. Nor do I care much about appearances. Your forehead isn't an unattractive feature. It's part of you and I think it's cute. Your eyes hold a small hint of mischievousness and excitement, and I find that rather attractive. You may not dress like a typical girl, and you may not act like one, but I think that's what sets you apart from other girls. You are your own person and you should feel beautiful in your own skin. Suzu-chan, you're plenty attractive to me. If nobody else can't see that, then it's their loss. You seem like a really sweet person, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you on a more personal level. Okay. Suzumabachi was blushing deeply now, but just to be sure, she decided to do something rather bold. Taking Naruto's hands in hers, she placed them on her breasts and asked, You really think these suit me? They're small, barely a B-cup. Naruto was a blushing mess now, but he decided to do as she wanted and began to gently massage them and get a good feel for them. Afterwards, he slowly retracted his hands and said, I think they fit you perfectly. And if your moans were anything to go by, I'd say your breasts are sensitive. You can feel it more than some girls with bigger chests. Suzumabachi blushed deeply and said, thank you. Do you maybe want to take a look at them? My clothes are kind of baggy, and. Blushing slightly worse than he already was, Naruto placed a hand on her cheek and said, it's alright, Suzu-chan. No need to rush into anything. Just know that I find you plenty attractive and I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. Besides, there's no telling when someone might catch us. The blushing Kunoichi nodded in understanding. Taking his hand in hers, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his, giving him her first kiss. Thank you, Naruto-kun. We should probably get back before people start to wonder where we went. Kissing him again, she prepared to walk with him back to the waiting area. However, as they kissed, she found that she rather liked the feeling. As his fiancé, damn that was weird to say. Kissed him, Naruto blushed worse and worse. However, he wrapped his arms around her and returned her kiss. It was such a pleasant feeling, and they were both feeling kind of tingly as they made out. They couldn't help it as they deepened their kiss and began running their hands over each other's bodies. When Naruto started sliding his hands up under her shirt, he suddenly realized what they were doing and he quickly stopped, backing away a step and breathing heavily. Wow. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take it so far. Suzumabachi's face felt like it was on fire. Looking into her fiancé's eyes, she smiled bashfully at him and said, I wasn't against it, you know. But you're right, we need to get going before somebody comes looking for us. Taking his hand in hers, she hurried with him back to the waiting area. As he followed her, Naruto's thoughts were all over the place as he fought to get his blush under control. That felt way too good. I could barely stop myself before we took it too far. I didn't think all that sexual frustration over the month would get to me so bad that I'd start doing that. The others will kill me if they find out how far we were willing to take things. Shortly after they arrived back at the waiting area, the two of them were approached by none other than Tenten. Looking into her boyfriend's eyes for a time, she soon let out a heavy sigh and said, matter-of-factly, you seduced another one. Didn't you? Naruto facepalmed and shook his head. Not quite. It seems my father and Inoki-sama set up an arranged marriage between our villages. It was an unexpected discovery, but I'm not against it. And, since I don't want to keep secrets from you and the others, I'll admit it now. Suzu and I kissed. I'm sorry, Ten-chan. Tenten shook her head before offering him a smile. It's okay, sweetheart. But we're going to need to talk to the others about this. You know that. The blonde nodded and said, I know. This whole situation caught me off guard, I will admit. I just hope Suzu-chan fits in with our crazy little family. Tenten giggled a bit before she said, we'll just have to wait and see. They just finished cleaning up the arena, so they should be calling the next match shortly. Naruto nodded and said, we'll need to keep an eye on this match for sure. Suzumabachi frowned in confusion for a time before she leaned in and whispered to Naruto, there's something you're not telling me, isn't there? The spiky-haired teen nodded and whispered back, I'll tell you once the match starts, I promise. Not right now. Trust me. Suzumabachi simply nodded and said, very well. I trust you, Naruto-kun. Thank you. Naruto said with a smile. Yujito Nai vs Choji Akimichi. As soon as the matchup was announced, Yujito quietly made her way down into the arena. Choji, on the other hand, looked incredibly nervous. However, he made a promise to himself that he'd give this match everything he had. As he went to pass Naruto, however, the blonde reached out and grasped his forearm. Blinking, he looked into Naruto's eyes and went to ask a question, only for Naruto's gaze to quiet him. Choji, be careful. I can't reveal much, but trust me when I say you can't underestimate her. Strike hard, strike fast, and keep on the move. Don't let her pin you down for long, if at all. Naruto said seriously. I promise that I'll explain everything later. Now go and kick some ass, okay buddy? Toji frowned in confusion for a time, but nodded and hurriedly disappeared down the stairs so he could begin his match. Something big's going on if it is Naruto worried. Do I even stand a chance against Yujito? After Choji left, Naruto walked with Suzumabachi and Tenten over to the railing so they could watch the fight. Leaning in close to his fiancée, damn that felt weird to say, he began to explain in a hushed tone. Take a look up at the Kages. When she did, he continued, the Kazekage was murdered recently. The man up there is Orochimaru, disguising himself as the Kazekage. Beside him is the Raikage. The two of them are allied with one another, and Orochimaru has managed to trick Suna into joining their alliance. They're planning an invasion using their precious weapons. Yujito, the Nibi Jinchuriki, and Gaara, the mentally unstable Ichibi container. Those two together can and will destroy Konoha if we don't act fast and take them down. Orochimaru and A want to see Konoha destroyed. But more than that, Orochimaru has a personal vendetta against the Hokage and has made it his personal goal to kill him. Chances are high that Tsuchikage-sama will get caught in the crossfire and have to pick a side. If he sides with Hokage-sama, then I sincerely hope the two of them can pull off a victory somehow. I've heard about how fast A is. And Orochimaru has plenty of dastardly tricks up his sleeves. It's going to be a hard fight. Suzumabachi frowned deeply and asked, what should we do? Shouldn't we warn them? I don't want Tsuchikage-sama to die. And, I don't know about you, but I don't fancy my chances against a couple of Jinchuriki. Her eyes then widened and she looked searchingly into Naruto's eyes. Don't tell me. The blonde nodded and said, I'm the QB Jinchuriki. I've been trained hard for not just the finals, but so I can take down the other Jinchuriki if need be. Jiraiya-sama has already alerted Fu-chan over there, here, he pointed at the mint-haired girl standing by herself, about the invasion as well. She is prepared to help me if I need it. Otherwise, she's staying out of all the combat if she can. This isn't exactly her fight, after all. Suzumabachi simply nodded in understanding. After a moment, she looked into his eyes again and asked, is there anything I can do to help? Naruto smiled at his fiancée and gave her a quick peck on the lips. The citizens have already been evacuated. A large number of fans in the audience are shinobi in disguise. We made sure to plan for this thoroughly so we could turn things around on them and crush our foes. I want you to work with my fellow rookies, such as Ten-chan here, to repel the invaders both inside the arena and in the village. But I want you to be careful about it. Don't take on more than you can safely handle. They won't hesitate to strike you down or worse. Seeing her shiver in disgust, he nodded and smiled sadly at her. Be careful, okay Suzu-chan. The Iwa Kunoichi frowned for a time before she wrapped her arms around Naruto and nuzzled her head into his neck, breathing in his scent and smiling to herself. I will. Just promise that you'll be okay. Gently running his hands up and down her back as he held her close, Naruto said, I will be. My sensei will be right there, helping me along the way if I need it. I'd say it'll be a piece of cake, but I've never had to fight another Jinchuriki before, so this is new territory for me. But I promise, I won't just survive, but I'll win, too. You won't have anything to worry about Suzu-chan. Smiling, the brunette looked up into his eyes and kissed him on the lips once again. Good. And I promise that I'll be safe. Besides, I want you to take me on a date once everything has been settled, she said with a wink. Naruto chuckled for a bit, but before he or the others could say anything, Genma's voice shouted out, winner. Yujito Nai. Naruto's eyes widened and he looked down at the field, only to see Choji was bleeding profusely from some of his wounds. He was being rushed off by the medic so they could tend to his wounds. Oh, shit. Choji. Tenten frowned deeply and said, that looked bad. I totally missed it, so I don't know what the hell she just did to him. But whatever happened, that was a quick fight. Way too quick. I really hope Choji will be okay. Naruto clenched the railing hard and scowled fiercely. Shit. I was hoping I'd get to see what she's really capable of but not at Choji's expense. I guess I'll be going in blind if I win the next match with you. He said, looking into his fiancée's eyes somewhat sadly. I really don't want to fight you. Suzumabachi smiled at him and took his hand in hers. It's okay. Let's both just give it our best shot, okay? I won't go down easy, though. She teased. Naruto chuckled a bit and said, good. Still, I think we'd both be better off if we saved most of our energy for the invasion. As much as I'd love for both of us to be promoted to Chunin, I want to make sure we're in fighting shape for what comes next. Smirking at her fiancé, Suzumabachi punched him in the arm lightly and said, what? Afraid you could lose to me? Naruto smirked back at her and said, oh, I'm terrified. Before she could say anything in response, he snaked a hand around and grasped her left butt cheek in his hand, causing her to let out an eep. In response and blush fiercely. Glaring into his eyes, she said, I hope you know, this means war. Naruto chuckled and gave her butt a nice squeeze before he leaned in and nipped at her ear. You're cute when you're flustered. And just for the record, I think your butt's fantastic. Tenten sighed and whopped the both of them in the backs of their heads. Okay, that's enough flirting for the time being. It's time for the next matchup. Wish me luck, honey. Naruto smirked at Tenten and said, you need luck. I thought for sure you'd just go down there and kick some ass. The blonde-haired weapons mistress giggled and said, smartus. Before grabbing him and kissing him hungrily. Once she was satisfied, she gave his butt a pinch before hurrying off so she could kick Shikamaru's lazy ass. Once she was gone, Naruto rubbed the spot where she pinched and chuckled to himself. I don't regret that even a tiny bit. He said, continuing to chuckle. Suzumabachi smirked at him and said, I see you like the feisty type. But what about me? She asked, getting his attention. When he looked her way, she tried to use the best cute pout she could to get a rise out of him. Smirking at her, he reached up and lightly flicked her forehead. Don't do that. It's cute, but you don't need to compete with the other girls, okay? Genuinely pouting this time, she said, okay Naruto-kun. Then, before he could react, she gripped his ass and said, firm. I like it. Blushing, Naruto looked at her, only to see her smirking at him. This is payback for earlier, isn't it? Yep. Suzumabachi said before she moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Why are you so warm? It feels so good being close to you like this. Naruto simply shrugged lightly and said, so I've heard. Anyways, let's root for Ten-chan, shall we? Of course. Go Tenten. She cheered, getting the weapon specialist's attention. Kick the sloth's ass. Naruto snickered at this and said, sloth. Yeah, I can see it. Shika the sloth. Snickering a bit more, he looked down at his friend and imagined him as a sloth, only to crack up laughing afterwards. Okay, yeah, he'd make a good sloth. Sasuke. The match between Suzumabachi and Amoy had ended about how Sasuke had imagined it would. To be fair, it could have gone either way, but the Kunoichi from Iwa had gone in with a plan and come out the winner. Then came the matchup between Yujito and Choji. She knew that Yujito was probably too much for Choji to handle, but even she didn't think the battle would have ended as fast as it did. Poor Choji. Do you think he'll be okay? Kin asked, a frown visible on her face. Ino shrugged dismissively and said, knowing Choji, he'll be alright. I kinda figured he'd lose after seeing what that Yujito girl could do in the prelims. He just doesn't have the skills he needs to fight someone like that. Eren frowned and looked at Ino. This is probably a stupid question, but do you even care about your teammates? The platinum blonde frowned and said, of course I do. Sort of. To be honest, I've spent most of my time thinking of Sasuke-kun. But. Sasuke palmed her face and let out a groan. Yes, I'm a girl now. I know. You'd think you and Sakura would have accepted that fact by now. I'll never be a boy again, so find someone else to obsess over, please. Sakura and Ino were in shock at Sasuke's casual dismissal of his sex change. After a moment to collect their thoughts, the pink-haired girl placed a hand gently on Sasuke's shoulder. But you can change back, can't you? If you were changed into a girl, then there has to be a way to make you a boy again, right? Sasuke scowled and shoved Sakura's hand off of her shoulder. Sakura, whatever Orochimaru tried to do to me, it failed miserably in its purpose. I don't know how to explain it, but I had some kind of reaction to the curse seal he tried to place on me. I didn't say this before, partly because I hadn't thought of it at the time, but when I was unconscious and trying to somehow deal with the curse seal I followed this light. It's almost like my true gender was revealed to me in that moment and some kind of haze was lifted from my mind. Whatever happened, it triggered this sudden transformation into a girl. Sighing sadly, Sasuke clenched and unclenched her fists a few times as she tried to come to grips with what had happened to her. Sakura, I've accepted the fact that I'll never be a boy again. I'm still coming to terms with being a girl now, but I'm not going to let this get me down. I'll still become stronger and I'll be able to bring my brother to justice. But it's not an all-consuming desire right now. As for my dream of reviving my clan. It'll be awkward as hell, but. Sakura and Ino both blushed deeply at the insinuation. But with a guy you're a boy, Sasuke-kun. You can't go doing that with some boy. It wouldn't be right. Ino exclaimed. Eren frowned at them, but decided not to comment on their anti-gay stance. Then again, do you have some problem with two men being together? Or is it the thought of Sasuke being with a man that bothers you? Sakura huffed and folded her arms across her chest. Does it really matter? Sasuke-kun will turn back to normal sometime soon, I'm sure of it. Then we can be together and I can give him the family he wants. Rin facepalmed at this before taking Sasuke's hand in hers. It's okay Sasuke. Just try to ignore them, okay? Not the easiest thing to do, I'll admit, but it's better than reacting. Sasuke was scowling to herself, but she managed to nod in response to Kin's words. Thank you Kin. Dealing with such diehard fangirls is, as Shikamaru would put it, troublesome. Gin giggled a bit and said, just know that you have us and Naruto-kun on your side, okay? So long as you're with us, everything will be fine. I promise. Chancing a glance at Karen and the two fangirls, Kin sighed and shook her head. Karen, it's pointless to keep arguing with them. Just tune them out. Iridied frowned for a time before turning around and huffing. Stupid fangirls. I wish my Naruto was here. I'd hug him tight and never let him go. Before Kin or Sasuke could reply, Kiba scoffed and asked, what the hell do you girls see in that loser anyways? He's just a freak and a loser. Sasuke was practically snarling at this point. Turning around, she glared fiercely at Kiba and said, enough already. Naruto's not some loser. He's my best friend and someone I respect. And out of all of us here, he's the one that managed to reach the finals, and he even won his first match easily. I wouldn't be surprised if Naruto makes it all the way to the final match and wins. That's how confident I am in Naruto and his abilities. Now do us all a favor and shut up. Kiba blinked a couple of times, just as the fangirls did. None of them knew what the hell to say in response to Sasuke's proclamation. Before any of them could figure out what to say in response, they heard clapping coming from a few rows behind them. Turning to see who it was, Kiba's eyes widened at the looks he was receiving from the various jonin sitting there. Shit. Kurenai glared hard into Kiba's eyes and said, you can bet we're going to be having words with your mother after this, Kiba. I'm sick of your arrogant behavior and your sexist comments. I figured you would have learned your lesson after Naruto kicked your ass last week. You're lucky to even be moving around with how badly he broke your leg. So what the hell is your damn problem? Kiba stayed silent, not wanting to deign his sensei or the other jonin with a response. So, seeing as she couldn't get a response out of him, Kurenai turned her attention to the fangirls. And you too. You should support your teammates. Stop badmouthing them, stop treating them like they don't matter, and shape the hell up. Right now, you two are weak. If you two were on my team, I'd make damn sure to beat the fangirl out of both of you. Now sit down, shut up, and watch the damn matches. But Sakura tried to say, only for Kakashi to interrupt her. Sakura, she's right. I've been far too lenient with you. You have alienated your teammate and made him feel unwelcome on this team. Sasuke and Naruto understand the concept of teamwork and trust in one's comrades. You? I'd say you're one of my biggest failures to date, and that's saying something. You can bet that if this team stays together, I'll be changing how I do things with the three of you. From now on, you're going to be molded into a model kunoichi, someone that can be respected. Right now, I can barely look at you without feeling disappointment. The Pincat frowned deeply, but didn't say another word. Instead, like Kiba, she sat down and turned her eyes to the field below, where Shikamaru and Tenten were now standing. The sumo looked hard into Ino's eyes and said, my approach has obviously not been a good one. I'll admit, I barely put forth the effort. I should have been more proactive in my approach, but I figured you'd be fine otherwise, all three of you. I honestly believed you cared for and respected your teammates. But I guess I was wrong. Like Kakashi, I think it's time I step up and start acting like a real sensei for a change. You can expect to go through hell in the coming months, Ino. By the time I'm done with all three of you, you're going to hate my very being, but you'll come to thank me, whether you like it or not. As with the others, Ino plopped herself back in her seat. None of them wanted to say a word, lest they make their situations worse. Seeing as they were being quiet finally, Anko grinned and said, if you ever want a little help beating the younglings into shape, give me a call. I'll gladly come and have some fun with everyone. Kurenai giggled and smiled at her. I think I might just do that. Winking at her, Kurenai leaned over and kissed Anko's cheek just to show her girlfriend a little affection. Anko blushed a bit but smiled as she wrapped an arm around Kurenai and let her rest her head on her shoulder. Love you. Anko whispered to her girlfriend. Love you too, Anko-chan. Kurenai said as she watched the fight now taking place down below. Now that the assholes were being quiet, Sasuke and her friends breathed quiet sighs of relief. Remind me to thank them later. She said to Karen and Kin, who giggled in response. Kage Booth. Hiruzen smiled as he looked at his old friend, Inoki. What do you think of the matches so far, Inoki Dono? Inoki frowned as he folded his arms across his chest. Well, in the first match, I'd say Naruto knows exactly what he's doing. He's fast, he's powerful, and he's efficient. I don't know what he and Temari said to each other, but Naruto never lost the edge for a moment. We haven't seen enough of him yet to determine if he's truly worthy of a promotion, but I get the feeling he'd make for a great one. Agreed. Then again, considering his lineage and who he's been trained by, I'm not surprised. Hiruzen agreed, a sly smile on his face. How about the second match? I'd say Suzumabachi earned herself a promotion. What about you? Inoki hummed in thought for a time before nodding his head. Indeed she did. She planned out every one of her moves in advance and took advantage of her foe's fighting style to ensnare him in her trap. I'd say she did a wonderful job and earned herself a promotion. Though I would like to see how she fares against young Uzumaki. Speaking of whom, we'll need to have a discussion after all of this is over, old friend. He said, casting a glance into Hiruzen's eyes. Hiruzen nodded his head in agreement. Agreed. As for Amway glancing at the Raikage, Hiruzen shook his head and said, what are your thoughts on how Amway did? From what he showcased today, if it were my choice, I'd decline his promotion. He was simply outclassed and outsmarted by his opponent. He frowned and folded his arms over his chest. You've got a point, Hiruzen. Amway let himself get caught off guard and he fell for one trap after another. He's got a ways to go if he wants to earn that promotion. I'm more interested in that Uzumaki kid. He's her son, isn't he? Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at the Raikage, but soon shrugged and said, I wouldn't know. We took him in one day and gave him a home here. It's unknown who his parents really are. I see. Said, narrowing his eyes suspiciously at the Hokage. After a moment, the burly man shrugged and said, I suppose it doesn't matter if he's truly an Uzumaki or not. The kid's impressive. Indeed he is. But he has yet to prove to us if he's ready for the duties and responsibilities that come with the rank of Chunin. Hiruzen said. Then, he decided to broach the subject of the third match with the other Kages. Dono, your Kunoichi is a force to be reckoned with, I'll give her that. She didn't hesitate for even a second. She went on the attack and tore Choji down in one swift vicious attack. Poor Choji never had a chance. He smirked and said, what can I say? She's been trained well. Inoki shook his head and said, that boy will be lucky to survive after what she did to him. There's a fine line between beating your foe and attempted murder, Raikage. You might need to put a leash on her before she kills somebody. He scoffed and said, I'll do no such thing. She's a loyal Kunoichi and she'll do as I tell her without question. She knows what would happen otherwise. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes again, but didn't say a word. Instead, he shared a look with Inoki and the two of them nodded their heads, coming to a mutual understanding. She's a dangerous one. Naruto, boy, I hope you're prepared to kill her if it comes down to that. You might not be given a choice. Shikamaru Nara vs Tenten. When Genma announced for them to begin, Shikamaru let out a loud yawn before saying, what a drag. I don't like fighting girls. Can we please make this quick? Tenten's brow twitched and she said, just for that, I'm going to beat you until you're black and blue all over. See? That right there is why I hate fighting girls. Girls are so violent and temperamental. Just like my mother. Shikamaru muttered, only to feel a cold shiver shoot up and down his spine. Turning his gaze towards the stands, he listened as his mother began to yell at him. Of course she heard that. So troublesome. Sighing heavily, he turned his gaze back to Tenten and said, by the way, shadow possession technique. Success. Thanks for being so cooperative. Wait, what? Tenten exclaimed in shock. She suddenly found it incredibly hard to move and realized that, while Shikamaru had been talking, he had somehow connected his shadow to hers. That sneaky son of a bitch. I fell for it. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Okay Tenten, you can still win this. Use what you've learned over the month. Think. When Shikamaru forced her to reach down and flip open her pouch of kunai, Tenten found herself smirking. That'll work. Shikamaru frowned in confusion as he stared at his opponent. She didn't seem to be panicking and she didn't seem worried that she'd lose. No, as soon as he made her open her kunai pouch, she started smirking. Alarm bells were going off in his head, but he realized that if he released her, she'd be able to unleash her full arsenal of weapons upon him, and he highly doubted he'd be able to survive a drawn-out fight with her. What the hell is she planning? Focusing on her chakra, Tenten connected tiny strings of chakra to each of her kunai and, with the subtlest of twitches, sent her kunai flying straight at Shikamaru's face. Sadly, instead of letting her go, he made the both of them bend backwards, allowing the kunai to fly safely overhead. Scowling, she tugged on the strings, bringing the kunai towards Shikamaru once again. For a while, they danced their deadly dance. Shikamaru was forced to split his attention between holding Tenten in place and having to dodge the kunai she kept attacking him with. Eventually, it got to the point where he knew if he didn't let her go now, he would lose either way. So, Shikamaru released Tenten and dodged out of the way of her kunai once again. Panting for breath, Shikamaru watched his opponent as she returned her kunai to her hands. I have to hand it to you Tenten, I didn't see that coming. I'm exhausted. It was a good plan, Shikamaru. You almost had me until you made that one mistake. Now, I have the upper hand here and you're nearly out of chakra, as far as I can tell. Do you want to keep going, or will you forfeit the match to me? Tenten questioned. Shikamaru thought over all of his options before eventually shaking his head. I'm done. You win, Tenten. Besides, lowering his voice so only she and Genma could hear, he said, might as well save the rest of my chakra for the invasion, right? Blinking at this, Tenten soon began to laugh and said, you really are as smart as they say. It was a good fight, Shikamaru. I learned a lot from it. Yeah. Good luck in your next match. You're gonna need it. Shikamaru said before he yawned and walked off, leaving Genma to announce Tenten's victory. Besides, I'd hate to piss off your boyfriend if I actually hurt you. Such a drag. Waiting area. When Tenten entered the contestants' waiting area, she hurried over to Naruto and glomped onto him. Naru-kun. I won. Naruto chuckled a bit and hugged his girlfriend close. Congratulations Ten-chan. I knew you could do it though I was a little worried when he captured you like that. Tenten grumbled for a moment and nodded her head. Yeah. I let myself get caught off guard. Even after all sensei taught us, I still fell for such a simple trick. I have a long way to go, don't I? Tilting Tenten's head up so she could look him in the eyes, Naruto placed a kiss upon her lips and said, we're still just teenagers. We're not infallible. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to continue making stupid mistakes as we grow. It's natural. You still did a good job and I'm proud of you. You earned your victory. Tenten blushed a bit and said, thank you, Naru-kun. That means a lot to me. Kissing him again, she leaned in and whispered, I love you. I hope you know that. Blushing worse than she was, Naruto asked, you do? Seeing her nod and smile bashfully at him, Naruto smiled wide and hugged her tight. I love you too, Ten-chan. I missed you so much. I never ever want to lose you again. The weapons mistress hugged him close and said, I'll never leave you. That's a promise. Meanwhile, a girl that had been silent this entire time watched the scene with a fierce glare on her face. Poor Hinata Hyuga didn't expect what she had seen throughout the month prior to the finals. Her Naruto-kun had been going on dates with not just one, but 3 girls. Now he had this tramp from Iwagakure hanging all over him. He was hers, damn it. The once timid, shy wallflower of a girl had transformed as a result of her jealousy and her rage. She wanted to prove herself to her beloved Naruto-kun and win his love. So, despite knowing she'd probably lose and maybe get hurt bad by her opponent, she decided she would fight and at least land one blow on Gaara. If she could get past his ultimate defense and deal some damage, she hoped dearly that her Naruto-kun would start to pay attention to her, and only her. You're mine, Naruto-kun. You just don't know it yet. Sasuke. Hell yeah. Go Tenten. Great job. Karen shouted as Tenten began walking off the field. Grinning at Kin and Sasuke, she said, I was worried there for a second, but she really pulled through and held her own. Kin nodded in agreement and said, right. When he snagged her with his technique, I thought it was over. If he hadn't made that mistake, he could have won the match right then and there. Sasuke nodded and said, if she had lost, I wouldn't let her live it down. After all the training we all did, if she had lost in her first match, I would have been highly disappointed in her. Karen gently nudged Sasuke and said, oh, you can admit it. You were worried about her, too. The Ravenet sighed and said, maybe a little. But you know sensei is going to up our training because she made such an easy mistake. Kin and Karen both went pale in the face. Oh Kami, you're right. Damn it Tenten. Kin exclaimed. Kurenai quirked a brow before turning to Kakashi. Have you been training them alongside Naruto? The cycloptic Jonin shook his head. I haven't seen them all month. I was planning to work on their training for a while, but I never got the chance. When I did see them, both Sasuke and Naruto looked exhausted half the time. Whoever was training them throughout the month was running them ragged, that's for sure. Asuma frowned and asked, if you weren't training them, then who the heck are they talking about? Banko shrugged and said, well, Jiraiya-sama's been hanging around Konoha all month. Maybe he's the sensei they keep mentioning. The other sensei's eyes widened at that. You might just be right. Kakashi said, shock evident in his tone. If Jiraiya-sama's been training them then just how powerful have they become? None of them could find an answer to that question. Hinata Hyuga versus Gaara. Hinata stared coldly at her opponent. Her hands were clenching and unclenching as she tried to deal with the anger coursing through her system. When Genma asked if they were ready to begin, she took a calming breath and nodded her head, immediately taking her modified Jukin stance. The most commonly used form of Jukin just never felt right to her, so she modified it to fit more with her litheness. She knew that she would likely get quite the tongue lashing for her mockery of tradition, but she honestly couldn't care less anymore. If her clan wanted to abuse her and treat her like a failure, then she'd own up to it and be a proud failure, just as her Naruto-kun was. Or at least, as he used to be. Now he was so confident and powerful. He had 4 women that wanted to be with him. Damn it. Shaking those thoughts off, Hinata quickly backhanded the cork that Gaara sent her way, dispersing it into harmless sand that fell to the ground some distance away. Afterwards, she gracefully moved out of the way of Gaara's sand tendrils, all the while maneuvering herself closer and closer until finally she got within range and sent out a quick palm strike towards Gaara's chest. Naturally, Gaara's sand rose to protect him, but she had expected that. She didn't move from her position or try to escape as he lashed out at her. No, she took up a stance that nobody could recognize. Then, she began to spin, lashing out with hundreds of razor-sharp blades of chakra with a technique she called Protective 8 Trigram 64 Palms. After a moment, Gaara let out a shrill cry as he realized he was bleeding. Hinata, the meat girl from before, had managed to wound him with her attack. I'm bleeding. It's my blood. What have you done to me? Hinata was shocked by what was happening to her opponent. He seemed to be undergoing some kind of change. However, realizing that if she didn't act now she'd be in some serious trouble, she calmed her nerves and unleashed her next attack, the 8 Trigram 64 Palms. The more she hit him, the more he began to crumple under her fierce assault. I won't let you win, Gaara. When she had finished with her assault, Gaara laid in a crumpled heap on the ground. Breathing heavily, she chanced to glance at the proctor, only to see him watching her opponent warily. Frowning, she returned her gaze to Gaara and watched in horror as he slowly stood up. He had undergone quite the change. Where once there was a boy's face, there was now some kind of sand creature practically swallowing Gaara whole. What are you? You're worthy. I will sacrifice your blood for mother. I'll kill you. Gaara exclaimed. However, before anyone could act, feathers began to rain from the sky. Scowling at this, Hinata quickly dispelled the obvious genjutsu and watched as everything erupted into chaos. What's going on? Genma cursed under his breath and quickly grabbed Hinata, leaping away from Gaara's attack before he could reach her. Pay attention, girlie. Your opponent doesn't look like he's going to stop until he kills you. If you really want to know what's going on, we're being invaded by enemy forces. Leave Gaara and Yujiro to Naruto. I want you to join the forces out in the village and do what you can to repel the enemy forces. When she went to ask him a question, he set her down and gave her a push. No time for questions. Get moving. Hinata slowly nodded before she turned and ran off, leaving Genma to try and deal with not just Gaara, but a handful of Odo shinobi that leapt down to confront him. Well, this day's just getting better and better. Naruto. Naruto blinked as he watched Hinata absolutely wreck Gaara's sand barrier, even landing a few deep cuts into Gaara's left shoulder and his right side, right between the ribs. In fact, the more she went on the attack, the worse his injuries became. Then, when it looked like she had won, Gaara underwent a transformation into some kind of raccoon monster. Then, the invasion took off at full force. Chaos. Explosions rang out throughout the village, and now the Kages were busy doing battle up on the rooftop above the Kage booth. Orochimaru's henchmen had erected some kind of powerful barrier to try and keep others out, but Naruto wasn't worried. They probably don't even realize that Jiraiya and Kurama were there. With them helping Hokage-sama, there's no way they can lose. Chuckling to himself at the thought, Naruto looked at his fiancée and then at Tenten. Girls, you know what to do. I have my own mission to complete. Looking past them at Yujiro, he saw that she was just standing there, looking unsurely around at all the chaos. Giving his girls a kiss each, he waited for them to leave before he approached the Nibi Jinchuriki. I thought you were planning to unleash the Nibi and wreck my home. But you're not. Why? Yujiro turned to look into his eyes, and what he saw worried him. She looked absolutely dead inside and she had tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just so tired. I'm tired of it all. Before Naruto could ask her what she meant, he heard a roar from down below. Peering over the edge, he watched as Genma and the Otogakure ninja came under attack by an enraged Gaara. Shit. Naruto muttered as he turned back to face Yujiro. I don't know what the heck's going on with you, but if you really don't want to destroy Konoha, then fight with us and repel the invaders. I'd stay and talk with you for a while to figure out what the fuck is going on, but I have to deal with an insane Jinchuriki down there. Fu. Looking at the mint-haired girl to see he had her attention, he said, I know you have no reason to follow my orders, but would you please look after Yujiro for me? Make sure she doesn't hurt anybody and make sure nobody tries to do anything to her either. Just stay safe, both of you. Fu nodded and stepped up beside Yujiro. Looking into the taller woman's eyes, she frowned at just how dead inside she seemed to be. After a moment, she shook it off and turned to face Naruto. Go. Deal with that lunatic. Roger that. Naruto said with a grin before he leapt over the edge, aiming straight for Gaara. Well, here goes nothing. Gaara, it's time to finish what Hinata started. Get ready to get your ass kicked. Fu frowned as she watched the Nibi Jinchuriki carefully. She had been wary of both the Ichibi and Nibi containers, simply because she knew that the two of them were the main weapons, loath as she was to call them that, for the invasion. However, the way Yujiro was acting now, as compared to how she behaved during the preliminary matches, was such a stark contrast, and it worried her greatly. The mint-haired girl looked into Yujito's eyes and asked, what on earth happened to you? You were enjoying the exams, right? But now seeing she had Yujito's undivided attention, she said, you look absolutely broken inside. During your battle with Kuretsuchi, you looked so excited. But it's all been a mask, hasn't it? Like the kind I've been wearing. And, if what I've heard about Naruto is true, then he was just like us. But, unlike us, he's actually managed to make friends. Hell, the guy has more than one girlfriend. I think you and I could really learn a thing or two from him. What do you say? Yujito looked into Fu's orange eyes and said, I would love to. But looking up at the rooftop of the arena, she said, the Raikage can end my life anytime that he wants. If I disobey, that'll be the end for me. I don't want to serve him anymore, but I can't disobey either. And now he's up there trying to kill the Hokage. He's just waiting for me to unleash Matatabi on the village. But looking back into Fu's eyes, she continued, I don't want to do as he says anymore. Even if it results in my death, I just can't do it anymore. He's made me do such terrible things, and he's. Fu frowned in confusion for a time as she tried to puzzle out what Yujito was trying to tell her. Then, her eyes widened and she looked down at Yujito's belly. No eyes watering, she looked into Yujito's eyes and said, he didn't. Anibi Jinchuriki nodded and said, I was raped by so many men. Only recently did one manage to impregnate me. All on his orders. Also he could have another host for Matatabi, in case I ever became too unruly. I never wanted this. I wanted my first time with someone to be special. I don't want to carry this child to term. I can't handle this. I can't do it anymore. I never asked for any of this. But I can't blame Matatabi. She's been good to me and she's helped me through so much already. If I had my way, I would die here today for all of his crimes. But I can't do anything thanks to the damn kill switch they implanted in my head. I disobey and they activate it, frying my brain and rendering me completely brain dead, if not actually dead. Not even a Biju can help heal something like that. I'm just so tired of it all. You have no idea how desperate I am for some kind of escape, even if it means I have to kill myself to get it. I feel so wrong. Fu turned and glared angrily up at the barrier where the Kages were fighting. That evil son of a bitch. I swear that if he doesn't die today, I'll tear him apart. What you've been through is something nobody should ever have to go through. Yujito stepped up to the railing overlooking the arena below. Looking out at the battles raging within the stands, she said, Fu. Glancing out the corner of her eye at the girl, she said, I want to help Konoha to win this fight. Do you think Naruto will need our help against Gaara? Fu shook her head and said, doubt it. Naruto's gone through some intense training this past month. From what I was told, he was learning under Jiraiya and the QB Gaara probably doesn't stand a chance. Looking down at Genma and Baki, Gaara-sensei, she said, Genma could probably use some help against all of those bastards down there. But glancing towards the stands, she said, I'd much rather hunt down Kabuto Yakushi and end him. He's Orochimaru's right-hand man. He's far too dangerous to leave alive. Problem is, I have no idea where the hell he's hiding right now. Yujito took a moment to think on it before looking down at the fight taking place in the arena. Fu, you help Genma. I'll go on the hunt for Kabuto. I just hope the Hokage and Tsuchikage can kill the Raikage. If they fail shivering, she looked back into Fu's eyes and said, good luck. And with that, she took off in search of Kabuto Yakushi. Fu frowned slightly as she watched Yujito leave. Good luck, Yujito. But looking back up at the barrier, her thoughts continued, the Hokage has already made preparations on what to do when he dies. It's like he knows Orochimaru and A are going to kill him. Meanwhile, the Tsuchikage has to make a choice. Aid the Hokage and risk his life, or stand on the sidelines and leave everything up to the Hokage. Then again, Jiraiya and the QB are up there, too. The Tsuchikage might not even need to get involved. Shrugging it off, the orange-eyed beauty leapt down towards the arena moments before a pair of wings formed on her back. Hey morons. When the Odo and Suna shinobi down below looked up, she grinned sinisterly at them and unleashed one of her unique jutsu, blinding the lot of them with a fine mist. Hearing them screaming as they began to panic, she giggled to herself and said, I love doing that. The Kages. Inoki frowned deeply as he watched Orochimaru and A with a wary gaze. The Raikage had already activated his lightning armor and looked like he could and would attack at any moment. However, ignoring the brute, he turned his eyes onto the slitted eyes of Orochimaru. To think, Rasa would die at your hands. Shame. He may not have been the kindest man, but he was no weakling. Quite wicked of you to kill him after he'd already agreed to this alliance. You really are a snake. Does A know that you plan to betray him, too? He scowled as he looked into the Tsuchikage's eyes. He knows better than to fuck with me. There's no way he'd betray me like he did the Kazekage. Besides, that fool began having second thoughts and planned to inform the Hokage about our plans. Doing away with the bastard was the right choice. Hiruzen chuckled to himself and said, "You really underestimate my old student. I suppose that, in the end, your arrogance will get you killed." Shrugging his shoulders, he turned his gaze onto his old student and said, "Knowing the snake, he's already got spies in your village, just waiting to strike. After all, once he has no more use for you and your people, what's to keep him from destroying Kumagakure as well?" Inoki kept a stern frown on his face, though on the inside, he couldn't help but smirk. "That's right, old friend. The old divide and conquer strategy combined with trickery. Turning them against each other will increase our chances of survival for sure." But chancing a brief glance at their surroundings, he thought, "It feels like there's something here that I'm missing. Could this be part of Hiruzen's plan? Whatever's going on, I hope it gives us a real fighting chance. We're strong, but we're old as well. As way too damn fast for us to nail down, and Orochimaru is a slippery bastard. The odds are not in our favor." Bane looked at him expectantly, the snake Sanin chuckled sinisterly and said, "Clever, but it won't work. You're trying to turn the two of us against each other. You know you can't win, so you're making an attempt to give yourselves a fighting chance. Shame on you, sensei." He scowled at Orochimaru for a time before returning his gaze to the Hokage. "Even if he does plan to turn on me, I'll kill the damn snake before he can. But before then, I think I'll settle for killing the two of you." Bane suddenly appeared before Hiruzen in a burst of speed. He was shocked when Jiraiya suddenly appeared in the Hokage's place, with a Rasengan zooming towards his face. "Shit." Jiraiya smirked as he slammed the Rasengan into the Raikage's face, shredding clean through his lightning armor and sending the man flying backwards towards the barrier. When a clone of Orochimaru appeared and caught the burly man, the white-haired Sanin TSK''D to himself. "So, you recognize that you need the allies, after all. Color me surprised." Orochimaru frowned to himself as Ace struggled to stay upright. Narrowing his eyes at Jiraiya, he asked, "How the hell are you here, Jiraiya? I didn't even sense you." It was at this point that the slippery snake heard a voice in his ear. "It's quite the handy little trick. They do say patience is its own reward. I can truly appreciate that saying now." Then, all Orochimaru felt was an intense pain erupt in his back. Quickly regurgitating a new, pristine body, the snake Sanin began to dodge all the attacks being sent his way courtesy of the stranger and his old teammate. Chancing a glance at the Raikage, he saw that A was starting to struggle as he fought against both Inoki and Hiruzen. Jiraiya's attack had really dazed the musclehead, and it was impacting his fighting ability. Sure, he would probably recover soon, but Orochimaru wasn't sure if A could last that long. Scowling, he unleashed a veritable army of snakes at all four of their opponents, distracting them all from attacking himself and A getting clear of his enemies. He quickly activated a genjutsu and watched as 3 coffins began rising from the rooftop. Once they were ready, he smirked to himself as the lids of each coffin opened, revealing the first, second, and fourth Hokages. Excellent. The first Hokage glanced around at his surroundings, unsure of exactly what the hell was going on. Noticing his brother, Tobirama Senju, Hashirama frowned and said, "I see. This is your jutsu at work, isn't it, brother? I told you not to tamper with something like this." Tobirama scowled as he looked around. "Now is not the time, Hashirama. It would appear that the village is in a state of peril." And turning to face Orochimaru, he scowled and said, "You're the one behind all of this, aren't you?" Orochimaru chuckled darkly and asked, "Does it really matter? Soon, you'll be helping me to destroy your own village and kill the third Hokage." Meanwhile, the fourth Hokage watched the Raikage for a time. Narrowing his eyes, he quickly disappeared, moving far faster than Orochimaru had expected. The snake had been in the process of trying to insert a kunai plus seal tag into the back of his head, only to blink in shock when the fourth disappeared. Quickly shaking it off, he looked to his clones to see they had succeeded in inserting the control tags into the firsts and seconds heads. "Better than nothing, I suppose," he said with a casual shrug of his shoulders. Meanwhile, A scowled as he was now doing battle with the fourth Hokage. Chancing a glance at Orochimaru, he scowled at the man before returning his focus to Minato. "I thought you had this under control, Orochimaru. This situation couldn't be any worse right now." Before Orochimaru could reply, he was suddenly forced to dodge an attack from Hiruzen, wielding Enma in his adamantine staff form. Scowling at his old sensei, he commanded the first and second Hokages to defend him. Once he had a reprieve from battle, he looked at A and shouted, "I was just trying to even the damn odds. I planned for Hiruzen and Inoki, not Jiraiya and the unknown. Deal with it." He scowled as he was forced to quickly duck a Rasengan aimed at his face again, once again by Jiraiya. However, when he tried to dodge Minato's attack, he screamed out in pain as he felt the loss of his left arm. Glancing behind him, he saw that the stranger had used some rather sharp claws to lop his arm right off at the shoulder. "You son of a bitch." Kurama simply smirked at the Raikage and said, "You know, I'm sure my father would be offended to hear someone say such a thing about him." The QB watched as A's lightning armor technique started to fizzle out. It was obvious he was losing his concentration, what with all the pain he was in. Still, he was a Kage for a reason, and he wasn't about to go down without a fight. Allowing his armor technique to fall, A waited for Jiraiya to move in for an attack. When the white-haired Sannin fell for the bait, A ducked under the sage's attack and slammed his remaining fist into Jiraiya's belly, sending him flying backwards, spittle flying from his mouth. Immediately afterwards, he spun around and grabbed Minato by the throat before slamming him down into the rooftop. However, he was unable to react in time when Kurama engulfed his form in a fire technique. As the Raikage screamed out in pain and dropped to the ground, desperately trying to put out the fire, he found that nothing he did worked. Even worse, when he peered through the flames, he saw certain death coming his way. As Minato's kunai pierced his heart, I realized that, even with how fast he was, speed meant nothing in the face of such overwhelming odds. Their teamwork was damn near flawless, and a single man, no matter how fast or powerful he was, just didn't stand a chance. Chuckling dryly to himself, he allowed his eyes to close as the last bit of life left him. It was at this point that the Hokage and his allies realized something peculiar. Glancing towards the Raikage's bodyguard standing near one of the corners of the barrier, Hiruzen asked, "Why did you allow this to happen? Shouldn't you have attempted to save your Kage?" One of the bodyguards, a man by the name of Derry, shook his head and said, "We were told to stay out of it. But, even if we hadn't been given such an order, we wouldn't have come to his aid. We may be loyal to the village, but A's practices were questionable at best. Besides, I couldn't risk dying. I need to be there for my child when he or she has finally been born." Jiraiya found himself scowling at the man and asked, "You're the one that knocked up Yujito, aren't you?" Seeing no point in lying, Derry nodded in response. "I am. It may not have been a voluntary conception, but it is my child nonetheless. Even if she doesn't want to raise my child with me, I still intend to take care of it regardless. Her happiness doesn't matter in the long run. So long as she remains loyal to the village and does as she is ordered, then there will be no need to take any drastic measures." Kurama chanced to glance at Orochimaru and the two Hokages looking in their direction. Quickly creating a couple of clones to stall them for the time being, he turned back to Derry and said, "So, you're the last one to harm my sister's container. The things you humans do sicken me sometimes. For Yujito's sake, it would be best for me to end you here and now. Now die." And with that, he dashed forward, swinging his claws at Derry's midsection. Scowling at this, the dark-skinned male quickly dodged to the side, away from the barrier and Kurama's attacks. Continuing to stay on the move, Derry kept glancing out the corners of his eyes at the others, trying to make sure nobody took him by surprise. After a short while of this, he glared into Kurama's slitted eyes and unleashed some of his black lightning, attempting to electrocute and finish the QB off. However, chuckling sinisterly to himself, Kurama quickly used the body replacement technique to swap places with A's second bodyguard, a man simply called C. When the black lightning struck him, C let out a horrendous scream and slowly collapsed to his knees before slumping over, the lightning attack ending his life. Eyes widening at this, Derry began to shake, unable to believe what he had just done. Turning a fierce glare towards Kurama, he prepared to attack him again, only to suddenly feel something penetrating the back of his skull. Blinking a couple of times, he thought to himself, "So, this is how I die. I'm sorry, my child." Jiraiya and the others gave the deceased duo a single glance before turning and watching as Orochimaru and the enslaved Hashirama and Tobirama finished off Kurama's clones. Inoki scowled at this and asked, "Anyone have any bright ideas? How do we beat them?" Kurama frowned deeply as he looked straight into Hashirama's eyes. "I'd like to say this is going to be easy, but it's not. Hiruzen, how does this jutsu of Orochimaru's work? Hashirama's a dangerous opponent for me. I can't let him catch me with that Mokuton of his. Then there's his brother." The aged Hokage stared straight into Orochimaru's eyes and said to his allies, "They can regenerate from any kinds of wounds we inflict. Worse yet is the fact that they will never run out of chakra. They can use their most powerful techniques all they want. We, on the other hand, will eventually run out of chakra the longer this battle goes on. I know of one way to remove them from the mortal plane, but..." Minato, seeing where Hiruzen was going with this, shook his head and said, "If you do this, there won't be a Hokage. You know Danzo will try to claim the seat of Hokage for himself if you die here." Jiraiya smirked at his old student and said, "Danzo's dead. No, if sensei does this, then we'll hunt down Tsunade and drag her back here to be the new Hokage. But, I want to try another approach to this before you try anything drastic like that, sensei. I just need some time to prepare a couple of things. Think you guys can hold them off for me for a while?" Inoki frowned for a time before saying, "I could probably erase them with my dust release, but I'm not sure if even that would be enough to destroy their bodies. Looking at Jiraiya, he said, "What you want us to do is easier said than done, but we'll keep them occupied. Just don't take too long, Jiraiya. Whatever you're planning, make it count and be quick about it." The white-haired man nodded before he said about working on a new seal, something that would help them win this fight. "Be careful, all of you." Naruto. The blonde Jinchuriki scowled as he looked at his defeated opponent. Kankuro had decided to show up and help his younger brother in his retreat. When the older teen attempted to stop him in his tracks, Naruto absolutely wrecked his shit, leaving the clown-like boy unconscious on a large tree branch. "You stupid bastard. I tried to warn you." Shaking his head, he turned and hurried off after Gaara, hoping to catch up with him before he could truly unleash the full might of the Ichibi upon Konoha. Upon reaching the unstable Jinchuriki, Naruto wasn't surprised to see that the sand had completely encased his body by this point. He now looked like some kind of grotesque sand monster. This is kind of appropriate considering the circumstances. Naruto thought to himself. Doesn't mean it's going to save him from a serious beatdown. Jiraiya wanted me to leave Gaara alive, but I might not be given much of a choice if this guy pushes me too far. Gaara looked at Naruto in silence for a time. When he finally spoke, malice seemed to be dripping from every word he spoke. You have changed. Mother says you are dangerous. You are worthy. Just like that girl. I'll kill you both. Glad to hear it. Naruto said with a chuckle following afterwards. However, I'm not going to give you the chance to go after Hinata. I'm going to kick your ass and protect my home. More than that, Jiraiya and I will help improve your seal. You'll no longer have to suffer, Gaara. So, as a courtesy, let me ask you this one question. Will you forfeit and allow us to help you? Narrowing his eyes at his opponent, Gaara said, "You cannot be trusted. I will kill you here and now. Now die." And with that, he sent a volley of sand shuriken flying at the blonde. Sighing softly, Naruto said, "Shame." Shrugging his shoulders, he dodged the attack before using his superior speed to slip in close, throwing a fist at Gaara's chest. Gaara was initially planning to just take the attack and capture his opponent in his sand, but his mother started screaming at him to dodge. Confused by this, he leapt away as quickly as he could. Watching his foe carefully, he questioned, "Why would mother insist I avoid your attacks?" Smirking sinisterly at his opponent, Naruto said, "The Ichibi is smarter than I thought. You don't need to know why, Gaara. Just know that, no matter what you try, you won't defeat me. My godfather and I will help you and make it so you can finally sleep. The Ichibi will no longer be able to torment and terrorize you. But first, I'm going to need to kick your ass. I do hope you can forgive me for this, Gaara." And with that, he disappeared in a burst of speed. Gaara, sensing the danger he was in, quickly erected a sphere of sand around himself in an attempt to ward off Naruto's coming attacks. When he felt pieces of his barrier falling apart as a result of whatever it was Naruto was up to, the Redeed began to panic slightly. So, desperate to save himself, he called on all of the Ichibi's power that he could and screamed out as he was taken higher and higher, merging with the beast inside of him as it grew to massive heights. Once the Ichibi had fully taken form, Gaara glanced at the forest below him, desperately trying to spot the whiskered teen. However, when he couldn't find Naruto, Gaara began to worry even more than before. What is this feeling? Why do I feel so different? What the hell is going on? Scarily, for Gaara at least, Naruto's voice began to echo out all around him. It was as if Naruto was somehow all around him, taunting him with his words. "Bringing out your trump card so soon. You must be more frightened than I thought. I'd say that's a good thing, but there's an old saying that I feel stands true. A cornered animal is a dangerous foe. Or something along those lines. I'm sure you get the gist. However, seeing as you have already lost, I think that point is rendered moot. Wouldn't you agree?" Gaara blinked a couple of times in confusion, wondering just what the heck his opponent meant by that. However, when he glanced down at the Ichibi's body, he spotted something that worried him greatly. All over the Bijuu's body were seals. How such a thing was possible without him even feeling it honestly scared the poor Jinchuriki. No. Naruto smirked wickedly to himself as he said, "Boom." Within an instant, dozens of explosions rang out as the body of the Ichibi was blasted apart, sand flying everywhere, moments before Gaara began plummeting to the ground below. However, before he could impact the ground, enough sand reformed beneath him and softened his impact. Grunting as the pain hit him, the Redeed slowly rose to his feet and glanced around. Where the hell are you? I refuse to lose to the likes of you." It was at this point that over 100 Naruto stepped out from where they had been hiding. "Really? Because, from my end, it looks like you've been losing this fight from the beginning. You see, Gaara, I've been trained specifically to combat people like you. All without needing to use the QP's power that's within me. I've worked my ass off to get this strong, and I don't plan to stop growing anytime soon. You see, there are people out there that are aiming to capture us Jinchuriki. I don't know what they want with us, but we need to become strong enough to fight and kill them if necessary. That's why I'd rather not kill you if I can help it. We should work together against the likes of the Akatsuki and other monsters throughout the elemental nations. Sighing softly, the real Naruto, who was cloaked using his godfather's jutsu, snapped his fingers. This was the signal for his clones to move in and restrain Gaara via the majesty of Fuinjutsu. The Redeed's eyes widened as he tried to protect himself with his sand, but try as he might, the sand just wouldn't obey him. It seemed that he was well and truly exhausted, and something was cutting off his connection to the sand he had grown so accustomed to. Closing his eyes after a moment, he resigned himself to his fate. So, this is where I meet my fate. Fine. I'm just so tired of it all. When Gaara felt nothing life-ending, he couldn't help but wonder why he wasn't being killed. As it was, all the Naruto clones were pummeling him to the point he was beginning to lose consciousness. However, he wasn't dead. Why? Why doesn't he kill me? Killing is how to prove your existence. How to prove your power. Why? After it was all over, Gaara was barely clinging to consciousness. Unable to so much as open his eyes, he asked weakly, why? Why wouldn't you kill me? Naruto didn't say anything in response. Instead, he slapped a paralysis seal on Gaara, restricting his movement. Afterwards, he nodded to his clones, watching as they began to dispel in groups of 10. After a while, only a group of 5 remained. Keep an eye on him. Jiraiya and I will go over his seal later and repair it. I'm going to check on Yujito and Fu. Then, well, we'll have to wait and see when I get there. Hopefully we're managing to repel our enemies. I'd hate to imagine otherwise. The clones nodded as one and watched as the boss prepared to leave. However, when a small tendril of sand latched onto the real Naruto's wrist, the blonde sighed and turned back to look at Gaara. Gaara, I won't kill you. I could have been like you if things had turned out differently. But more than that, you could really use a friend. Well, you have something better than that. You have your siblings. Temari and Kankuro. They care about you, even if they're kind of terrified of you. You're important to them. Let them in, Gaara. Caring for others isn't a sign of weakness. In fact, having people you care for and want to protect can help motivate you to become stronger than you ever thought possible. I'll admit, for a good, long while, I had nobody that cared about me. I grew to truly hate the people of Konohagakure. Hell, I still hate them. But I've made a few friends, I have multiple girlfriends and a freaking fiancé, and there are definitely people I care about here. They're what pushed me to become this strong. They're what's driving me to reach ever greater heights. And you can have that as well with your people. Start with your siblings. Show them your respect and admiration. Show them that you care. Then, with their help, you can start to prove the people of Suna wrong about you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should stop hating them. I'd be a damn hypocrite if I told you to just let it all go. Just work to find people that will be precious to you. Hell, I hope you find yourself a nice girlfriend that you can settle down with and be happy together. That is why I will not kill you, Gaara. If it helps any, I'll be your first ever friend. And, once we've fixed up your seal, I hope you'll come to see me as a cherished one. Now, if that answers your question, I need to get moving. We'll be seeing each other again later. For now, try to relax. You're going to be sore for a while, but you're not in any danger here. Waving goodbye to the Redeed, Naruto gave him a smile before he turned and disappeared back into the forest, moving towards the arena once more. Left on his own, the Ichibi Jinchuriki thought over Naruto's words. He didn't so much as speak a word, nor did he move even an inch. Precious ones. Friends. Maybe he's right. Growing stronger only for myself, something about that has never quite felt right to me. Friends. Sasuke. As Sasuke removed her kunai from an Odo shinobi's neck, allowing the man to drop like a rag doll, she turned to glance into the distance once more. When the Ichibi appeared in all its glory, she and the others were initially worried about their loved one, but Kin reminded them that Naruto had been trained for such an event and would be just fine. Now that she looked, though, she noticed something was odd about the massive creature. Are those seals? Kin, hearing this, finished slitting her enemy's throat before spinning around and looking at the Ichibi. Yeah, before she could say any more, a series of loud explosions erupted from the Ichibi. The sound echoed throughout the village, deafening the area. More than this, however, was the fact that a veritable heatwave washed over everyone fighting in the arena and in the village of Konoha. Everyone was disoriented slightly by what had just happened, but the more experienced ninja quickly recovered and went on the attack once again. Earlier, Sasuke and the girls had left the arena to help repel the invaders, traipsing about through the village. They had quickly encountered enemy ninja from all 3 opposing villages. Suna, Odo, and Kumo. Ever since then, they'd been battling practically non-stop and they were getting a little exhausted. So while they stumbled slightly as a result of the blast, the more experienced Kumo and Suna shinobi recovered quickly enough to resume their attack. Seeing this, Sasuke struggled to gain her bearings again. As one of the enemy ninja began to approach the three of them, Karen, Kin, and Sasuke, the black-haired uchiha quickly grabbed three kunai and took aim. However, she was unable to focus just yet and was stuck watching as the enemy grew ever closer with a nasty-looking grin on his face. If they wanted to kill us, we'd be dead already. What the hell do they want? Karen, as if sensing Sasuke's thoughts, screamed out, they're planning to rape us. Damn it, we need to move. Sasuke's eyes widened in horror and she renewed her struggle against the feeling of nausea and dizziness that had overwhelmed her. However, she needn't have bothered. Within an instant, wasps and weapons rained down upon their foes, poisoning them and skewering them respectively. Glancing in the direction they came from, the onyx-eyed uchiha smirked and said, about time you two showed up. Thanks for the save. Hopping down to them, Suzumabachi looked the three of them over, smiling as they finally recovered and stood straight again. I'm glad you're all alright. We would have been here sooner, but we had to deal with some nuisances of our own. Not to mention that blast. I assume that was Naruto-kun's doing. Kin nodded and said, most likely, yeah. We weren't expecting it to affect us all the way over here. Kami, I hope he's okay. Tenten glanced in the direction where the Ichibi had been, only to see a veritable shower of sand raining down all over the forest. Chuckling softly to herself, she said, I think he's just fine. Keep in mind that we were trained to be able to take on opponents like Gaara and Yujito. Naruto-kun just happens to be our trump card against such foes. Turning back to the others, she said, our focus should be on repelling the invaders. I'm just glad we got here in time to keep those sickos from doing anything to you. Now, can you move? Kin looked herself over before turning her gaze on her friends. After a moment, she looked into Tenten's eyes and said, I think we're all right. It was a close call, but we're good now. What should we do now? Sasuke frowned as she thought it over. After a time, she looked at their immediate surroundings and said, with some help, we've managed to clear out most of the western part of the village. The north part seems to be fine, so I think it's safe to assume that the enemies there have been dealt with. I say we go east and work together to slay our foes. I just hope everyone will be okay. Suzumabachi chanced a glance towards the arena rooftop where the Tsuchikage and the others were currently doing battle. She wasn't sure who was winning the fight or even if the good guys were still alive. Still, she had to hold out hope that everything would be just fine. So, shaking it off, she looked at the others and said, that sounds like as good an idea as any. I won't abide any threats to Naruto-kun and his loved ones. Eren quirked a brow at this and thought, another girl after Naruto-kun's heart. He sure attracts girls to him like a moth to a flame. She'd better not try to hog all his time. That's all I'll say. Arena. Sakura and Ino watched in horror as Konoha ninja did battle with the invading forces of Suna, Odo, and Kumo. They had both recognized the genjutsu for what it was and broke it easily, but they kind of wished they hadn't. Almost immediately after they broke the genjutsu, they had come under attack by two Odo shinobi. But, because they hadn't taken their training seriously at all, they could do nothing but watch in horror. Thankfully, they had been saved by Kakashi, who quickly dispatched both foes. Once both ninja were dead, he had told the two girls to sit tight and not to bring attention to themselves. So, all the two of them could do was watch as the various ninja of Konoha fought hard to drive back the invaders. Kiba had been knocked out by the genjutsu and was therefore blissfully unaware of what the hell was going on around him. As far as they were concerned, he was a lucky bastard. What the hell are we supposed to do? I hate to admit it, but I'm way too weak to fight off full-grown adults like this. Ino whispered to Sakura. The pin cat looked at her friend rival and shook her head. I don't know either. I've been more focused on winning Sasuke-kun's affection and relying on him to keep me safe. I didn't think I'd ever be in a situation like this. Heck, at this point, I'd even accept Naruto's help, and that's really saying something here. Are we even cut out to be ninja in the first place? Ino asked. I'm really questioning why I wanted to be one to begin with. All I wanted was to be with Sasuke-kun, even to the point that I started dieting just to make myself look pretty to him. But now. Sakura frowned at Ino and shook her head. Don't tell me you're giving up on Sasuke-kun. Ino shook her head and said, never. I don't care how long it takes, we'll find some way to turn him back to his true gender, and then we can be happy together. But, in the meantime, maybe we should start taking our careers more seriously. The emerald-eyed girl beside her shook her head again and said, maybe. But I don't want Sasuke-kun to think I'm ugly just because I put on some muscles. I don't want to look like some kind of beefcake. Ino shrugged and said, it's better than remaining weak. At least, if we train enough, we can learn to protect ourselves. Besides, maybe Sasuke-kun actually likes girls with a little muscle mass. The pin cat frowned at this and asked, really? Then again glancing at Ino in thought, she said, nothing we've tried so far has worked. Sasuke-kun just doesn't seem to be interested in any of the girls we know. So, maybe you're right. Besides, I don't like the alternative. Remain weak and either get killed or shivering, she soon said that. I want my first time to be with my one, true love. I just hope we can get the training we need. After neglecting to take our careers seriously for so long, what if nobody wants to take us seriously? Ino looked a bit crestfallen at the realization that her friend had a point. We're pathetic. All this fighting over a guy has made us both pretty pathetic, huh? After what we've done and how we've acted, nobody would take us seriously. But, looking into Sakura's eyes, she said, I'm not giving up on Sasuke-kun. Ever. Sakura nodded in agreement with her dearest friend and rival. Agreed. We're going to become kunoichi that Sasuke-kun would be proud of. He won't be able to resist us. I think we should try and learn some fuinjutsu so we can eventually turn Sasuke-kun back to normal. He may not care anymore, but we do. Sasuke-kun will be a boy again. That's a guarantee. Ino grinned and high-fived her friend. Damn right. But, when he's back to normal, he's mine. After all, you just never stood a chance. She said with a nasty smirk on her face. Dream on, pig. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get myself killed here. We're not strong enough to repel the invaders like Sasuke-kun and the Jonin. So, want to find some place to hide. Sakura said. Ino frowned as she glanced around at all the fighting taking place. After taking stock of their current situation, she looked into Sakura's eyes and said, so long as we stay still and quiet, we should be fine here. There's plenty of Konoha ninja around to keep us safe if we stay here. But, if things get bad, we should probably make our way to one of the underground bunkers where it's safest. The problem with that, though, is the fact we run the risk of being caught by the bad guys. Sakura nodded before she turned and watched as Kakashi used his Rikiri jutsu to impale a man's chest. At this point, she began to look and feel ill. Turning around, she parked her butt in her seat and shook her head. Staying right here seems like our best bet. Let's just hope everything will be okay. I hate feeling this weak and useless. Then you should have taken your training more seriously. Kurenai said as she threw an Oto Kunoichi over them, watching as the woman's head impacted the railing shortly before she collapsed, the life leaving her. Stay where you are for the time being. You're safe here. But, if I have my way, you too will become competent Kunoichi, if not powerful ones. Now sit down, shut up, and try not to bring attention to yourselves. Both girls quickly nodded and shut up, not saying another word. Please, let everyone be okay. The Kages. Hiruzen grunted as he received a painful kick to the chest. Stumbling backwards a few feet, he glared at Orochimaru and said, you're an abomination, Orochimaru. I should have killed you before when I had the chance. Damn my sentimentality. The snake Sanin chuckled sinisterly and said, it wouldn't have made a difference. Actually, if you had tried, you'd be dead. Glancing towards Jiraiya, he saw that he had finished with his seals and was preparing to act. With a smirk, the twisted snake opened his mouth and let his Kusanagi sword shoot forth, extending until it nearly reached his old teammate. Before it could, however, Hiruzen swapped places with the spy master, taking the blade through his chest, although not fatally. Coughing up blood, the aged Hokage looked at the sword's blade more closely and chuckled ruefully to himself. Venom. Of course. And I bet there's no known antidote either. Damn. Spitting some blood onto the rooftop, he watched as the Kusanagi retracted, pulling out of his now open wound. Bastard. Jiraiya's eyes were wide as he witnessed this brutal act. Narrowing his eyes at his old teammate, he prepared to go on the attack, only for his sensei to send a look his way, signaling that he needed to finish what he started. So, with great reluctance, he turned and moved, slapping the seal tags onto the foreheads of the first and second Hokages. Holding up a single-hand seal, he activated the tags and watched as life returned to their eyes, moments before their bodies crumbled into dirt, leaving the bodies of Zaku Abumi and Dosu Kanuta behind. Sighing softly, the aged Sanin looked at Orochimaru and said, surrender, Orochimaru. You're finished. The snake Sanin chuckled as he looked from his sensei to Jiraiya. Oh, really? I'm sure they'll have something to say about that. The white-haired man looked over his shoulder before turning his gaze back onto Orochimaru. I see. As soon as the barrier goes down, we're going to be swarmed by your ever-so-loyal followers. Too bad you'll never get the chance to escape with them. Sure enough, waiting just outside the barrier were a large number of Odo and Suna ninja. However, they were under attack by the Anbu of Konohagakure. It was Jiraiya's hope that the Anbu would root the enemies before the barrier dropped. Before he could react, Orochimaru was suddenly stabbed in the side by Minato. Spitting blood to the side, the snake attempted to slice into the undead bastard with his sword, only for Minato to disappear in a burst of speed. Once his foe had disappeared, Orochimaru regurgitated a new body and quickly blocked an attack by Kurama, then an attack by Minato. Hiruzen had already collapsed to the ground, the life gradually leaving his eyes. Sadly, for the good guys, at least, there was no way to save the third Hokage. All they could do now was focus on Orochimaru and try their absolute best to kill the son of a bitch. The slippery snake continued doing his best to deflect and avoid every attack coming his way, narrowly avoiding the worst of the attacks. Sure, he was taking quite a bit of damage from the group of three, but so far he hadn't taken any critical or fatal wounds. However, in the midst of his fight with the 3 Kage-level shinobi, he had forgotten about one person in particular. And now, he was going to pay the price for it. In an instant, Orochimaru felt true agony as something hit him from behind. He noticed that his 3 opponents had each moved back mere moments before some kind of attack hit him. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw Inoki standing there, a smirk on his face. It was at this point that Orochimaru realized his error and knew what was about to happen to him. "You blasted old man." Now coughing up blood, the snake glared fiercely into Inoki's eyes. "How dare you?" Inoki simply smiled at him and said, "Goodbye and good riddance, Orochimaru. May you rot in hell for eternity. And may Hiruzen find peace in the next life. He did not deserve to die like this. Especially not at your hands." And with that, he and the others watched as Inoki's dust release technique destroyed Orochimaru on a molecular level. With nothing remaining of their master, the Sound Four's eyes widened before they released a barrier and attempted to flee. The keyword being attempted. They were quickly caught and subdued by a number of jonin and what anbu were currently available. One of them, a girl by the name Tayuya, frowned to herself as she looked around. "They've all been killed or forced to flee. Konoha put up a better fight than we thought they would. 3 fucking villages should have been able to crush this shitty place, but obviously, it just wasn't enough. Now what the fuck do we do?" Meanwhile, with the death of Orochimaru, the jutsu that was keeping him alive began to fade. Knowing his time was coming once again, Minato looked into his old sensei's eyes and said, "Hopefully you can find Tsunade and bring her back. Konoha's going to need a powerful Kage like her. Goodbye sensei." The white-haired Sannin watched as his student's undead body crumbled into dirt on the ground, leaving a dead Oto Kunoichi behind. "She looks like she was maybe only 11 or 12 years old. What a shame." Turning to their captives, Jiraiya stepped up to them and looked them over carefully. "You 4 will be spending some quality time with T and I. One way or another, we'll get the answers we want from you, no matter what they may be. Take them away. I've got other business to take care of," he said, waving them off dismissively. After the anbu disappeared, Inoki stepped up to Jiraiya and asked, "What will you do now? Will you look for that wayward teammate of yours? Tsunade Senju, correct?" Seeing Jiraiya nod in response, the aged Tsuchikage said, "From what I understand, she's been wallowing in her own self-pity for ages now. That is no way for someone to live." Sighing softly, he shook his head and stared up at the sky. "I have something to speak with you and the council about. Something to do with Naruto Uzumaki and a certain someone from my village. It has to do with a certain arrangement I made with Minato. As you are the strongest in the village and the most capable person to take over the mantle of Hokage, should Tsunade not accept, I think it's fair for you to weigh in on this topic of discussion. For now, we should take stock of the damage and make sure that the enemy has been routed or forced to retreat. I would rather we not have any more surprises today." Jiraiya nodded in response and said, "Agreed. And I'll admit that I'm curious about what you need to discuss with us. However, now is not the right time to discuss it. Before we set out, however, I need to ask. Whatever happened with your bodyguards? I thought they'd have tried to help us, but they were nowhere to be found." Inoki looked up into Jiraiya's eyes and said, "I told them to stay out of it if something happened. They're not yet ready for a battle between Kage-level opponents just yet. Besides that, I knew something strange was going on from the moment I set foot in this village. So, I instructed them to help Konoha should anything happen. My guess is that they were out helping to repel the invaders." Turning his gaze forward again, he soon set off with Jiraiya to check on the damages and the state of the invasion. As they went along, he looked at Jiraiya again and said, "I do have to wonder about something, though. What will you do in regard to our enemies today? I know it is a topic best discussed when a new Kage has taken office, whether it be you or Tsunade, but I want to hear your thoughts on the matter." Jiraiya shook his head and said, "It's not really up to me to decide at this point. However, if it was up to me, I'd first deal with Suna. They betrayed our trust and they need to answer for it. I'd rather not make them into our enemies for real, considering they were tricked by Orochimaru. However, they still went through with their attack and will need to answer for it. So, I would make them pay some form of restitution for their actions before arranging a new contract of a sort to cement our alliance with one another. I think I know exactly what I'd do to ensure they remained loyal instead of betraying us again." Smirking up at Jiraiya, Inoki couldn't help but chuckle a bit. "I see. Quite the shrewd mind you have, Jiraiya. Tell me, what would you do next?" Once Suna was dealt with, I'd have a talk with the Wind Daimyo and set things straight. After all, it was thanks to Danzo and the other elders that he foolishly began giving our village missions with higher pay. Sighing softly, Jiraiya looked at Inoki once more and said, I'd deal with Kumagakure next. I'd try to negotiate a form of peace treaty with them, but I would accept a ceasefire if need be. Peace is preferable to constant war, but if they push us too far. Inoki nodded at the unspoken message. As he and Jiraiya looked around at all the damage that had been done, he said, a Tagakure would be easy to deal with. I assume you'd seek to root the enemy completely until a Tagakure and Orochimaru's little pets were all dealt with. Jiraiya nodded and said, I doubt I would leave anyone alive. Anyone that willingly served that man is someone I wouldn't entrust with my life and livelihood. Looking down at Inoki, he said, once I've found all of his hideouts, I'd welcome the help, Tsuchikage Dono. Inoki chuckled a bit and said, I'll have to keep that in mind. For now, it looks like the enemy has truly fled. With their masters dead, I'm not surprised they'd run away like that. Though. Jiraiya nodded again and said, I'll need to check on those with Orochimaru's curse seals. If they're gone, then fantastic. If not. The aged Tsuchikage said, then chances are that Orochimaru still has some way of living on with his true body destroyed. I wish you luck with your endeavors, Jiraiya. Thank you, Tsuchikage Dono. Jiraiya said. Vegito. Vegito scowled as she hunted for any sign of her target. She had found Kabuto earlier and had wounded him using some of the Nibi's chakra, but the blasted coward had escaped after it became obvious he was going to lose the fight. She had continued in this fashion for a time. She would find him, do battle in an effort to kill him, and then he'd slip away somehow. It was growing on her nerves and, when he escaped this time, she damn near lashed out at her surroundings from the frustration she was feeling. Unable to find him again, she scowled and clenched her fists tight. Damn you, Kabuto. Slippery fucking bastard. Practically growling at this point, she soon relaxed her muscles, unclenched her hands, and let out a heavy sigh. Damn it. It was at this point that Fu landed beside her, her wings disappearing once she did. Looking at the blonde Jinchuriki, she asked, how'd it go? Did you find that jerk? Vegito shook her head and said, I did, but he kept getting away from me. I have no idea where he is now. Most likely, he's already fled the village. Looking into Fu's eyes, she asked, how'd things go on your end? Do you know who won the fight between the Kages? Fu glanced back towards the arena and said, Genma's safe. So are the majority of the Konoha forces. A lot of people did die, but Konoha did pretty well. As for the Kages. Well, I'm not sure. I left before the barrier went down. I've been fighting all the Odo and Kumo ninja I came across. I'm glad you're alright, Yujito. Yujito smiled at her companion and said, thanks Fu. Glancing around, she realized how quiet it was. What do we do now? This whole place is like a ghost town now. Before Fu could answer, Sasuke's voice could be heard saying, that's because the enemies have fled. As for you, how can we trust you? You were meant to be one of the trump cards to be used against us. When Sasuke and her friends walked up to them, Yujito flinched and looked away. Fu, seeing this, spoke up in her defense. She's not a bad person. Though the Raikage did terrible things to her and she just couldn't take it anymore. Naruto trusted me with her care and I can promise that she doesn't mean anyone here any harm. Perrin frowned for a moment as she reached out with her senses. What she felt from Yujito worried her. She's pregnant, isn't she? And it wasn't willingly. Am I right? Seeing the look of pain cross Yujito's face only proved her query to be correct. I'm sorry. Why don't you stay here in Konoha with us? You'd be more than welcome here, I'm sure. Besides, Naruto can easily vouch for you as a fellow Jinchuriki. I'm sure he'll be a great friend to you. But, if you're uncomfortable around men. Yujito frowned and shook her head. No, it's okay. And I'd love to stay if I'd be welcome here. But. Sasuke frowned deeply and said, Naruto hasn't had the easiest life here once it was discovered he was the QB Jinchuriki. If they find out that you house the Nibi, your life wouldn't be an easy one, either. Still, it would be better for you here than it would be somewhere else. They won't put you through something like that. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to go through something that traumatic. My situation may not be the same, but I can understand pain to some degree. If you need a friend, then I'll try to fill that role. Yujito smiled at Sasuke and the others and said, thank you. Does anyone know what we should do now? It's just so quiet right now. Before anyone could reply, Jiraiya and Inoki touched down next to them. Looking them over, Jiraiya said, now, a council meeting will be held to discuss today's events. We'll figure out what to do from there. You lot will take it easy for the time being until you're called upon to start taking missions again. Vegito, I ask that you come with me and allow me to have a look at what the Raikage did to you. If I can't help you, then I guarantee Tsunade can. Fu, you're welcome to stay as long as you like before returning to your home. I know you don't have it easy there, but. The mint-haired girl shook her head and said, I know. You'd rather not upset them by keeping me here. I'm their precious guard dog, after all. I hate it, but I know there's nothing I can do about it. Just promise me you'll look after Naruto and Yujito. Jiraiya nodded, but before he could say anything, Kin piped up and asked, couldn't you arrange an arranged marriage between Fu and someone from this village? That could work to give Fu a better life here, in Konoha. Couldn't it? Inoki shook his head and said, they'd likely see right through that ploy. Besides, a Jinchuriki is a powerful deterrent for any kind of attack on their village. If anything, they'd demand that, whoever Konoha chooses as her spouse, they'd have to move to Tokigaku to be with her. No, I'm afraid there's really nothing that can be done to free Fu from her fate. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. Fu nodded and looked to be quite glum at the moment. I already knew that. I accept my fate, no matter what it is or how bad it looks. I hate it, but what can I reasonably do? Not a damn thing. Yujito frowned deeply and hugged Fu tight. I'm sorry. I wish there was something I could do to help you. You've been so kind to me. I. As tears began building in Yujito's eyes, Fu smiled at her and said, it's okay. I'm just glad you're going to be alright here. I hope you and Naruto get to be very good friends, Yujito. And I hope we get to see each other again soon. For now, I should really get going. With the Chunin exams interrupted like this and the invasion thwarted, there's no more reason for me to stay. Please, take care of yourselves. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving a group of conflicted teens and 2 solemn adults behind. Kin clenched her fists tight and said, what is wrong with people? They're the ones that make Jinchuriki, only to treat them like they're subhuman monsters, it's not right. Jiraiya sighed and shook his head. I know. But there's nothing we can do about it. A vast majority of people out there in the world are absolute monsters. It's unfair, but we can't really do anything to change people's perceptions of them. It's just how things are. I'm not saying it's fair or right, but it's just how it is. Well, it sucks. Sasuke said. I hate people like that. I know what it's like for people to treat you differently for one reason or another. After what Itachi did to my family, people began to suck up to me and give me everything and anything they could in an effort to win my favor as the last loyal uchiha. I was treated like a porcelain doll. Fragile and vulnerable. Girls were constantly trying to win my favor in the hopes that I'd choose to be with them. All because their parents told them to try and seduce me with their supposed charms. None of them truly cared for me as a person. I was simply a way to get some easy money and fame in the village. TCH. Sighing heavily, the female Uchiha looked around at the others and said, meanwhile, Naruto had it just as bad, though on the opposite spectrum. He has been treated like the QB incarnate. They've made him feel like an outcast in his own home village. They've abused and mistreated him. And yet, throughout it all, he remained strong and didn't let them ruin his dreams or take away his desires. Naruto is stronger than anyone I've ever known. But he's had it really bad here. If things continue getting worse for him here, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he decides to abandon the village in search of greener pastures. Kami knows that other villages would be lucky to have him. Jiraiya scowled and said, this is not the same village Minato and the Kages of the past envisioned it would be back when they founded it. If they could see what's become of their village and its people, they'd be rolling in their graves. Sighing heavily, he looked at each of the girls and said, come. We're going to check on the state of the village and then we'll figure things out from there. I want you girls to take it easy and wait for further orders. Chances are, I'll have a mission for you girls to carry out with Naruto and me. Eren smiled excitedly and asked, what kind of mission? Something awesome, I hope. Jiraiya chuckled and said, perhaps. Now, come along. Once we're done, I want you girls to find Naruto and stay with him. He's already dealt with Gaara and the 2 of us will be having a look at his seal later. I don't really know where he could be right now, however. Sasuke frowned to herself and said, if he isn't back yet and hasn't been helping repel the invaders. Benton frowned at this point and asked, you don't think he got into some kind of trouble, do you? Jiraiya's eyes widened slightly before he said, something might have happened, yes. Girls, I want you to find Naruto. Now. Yujito, Fu, go with him. Right. The girls exclaimed as one before they all set off in search of Naruto. Please be okay, Naruto. Sasuke thought, worried sick about her dearest friend. Naruto. And you're targeting me because why exactly? Naruto questioned as he stared at Kabuto Yakushi. Naruto had been on his way back to the village when the 4-eyed bastard appeared in front of him, blocking his path. He had a number of Odo ninja surrounding him with Kabuto in the lead. It hadn't taken a lot of effort to dispatch the Odo ninja, but Kabuto was proving to be a rather annoying foe to fight. Every attack Naruto hit him with, the bastard would just heal from it within moments. It was honestly kind of infuriating to deal with such an annoying opponent. Kabuto simply smirked and said, you're a rather annoying thorn, Naruto Uzumaki. It's obvious that you've become much stronger over the past month and I can't have you getting in the way of my goals and ambitions. There are things I really need to do and I don't want you to be a pest. The blonde quirked a brow and asked, really? That's your reason? I couldn't be bothered with you, Kabuto. You weren't even a blip on my radar. Why go after you when there's no reason to do so? Bude, if you insist on being a little bitch, I don't mind kicking your ass for a while. Cause believe me, I could kick your ass all day and never get tired of it. So seriously here, just go away. I want nothing more to do with you. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Naruto. You're a very real threat now, and if I'm to succeed in reviving Orochimaru-sama, you need to die. It's just a shame Sasuke-kun didn't work out for Orochimaru-sama. Although, perhaps there's a little more to his transformation, The seal may have disappeared from his skin, but it might still be there, hiding beneath the surface. Quite the interesting puzzle Sasuke has become, Naruto sighed and palmed his face. You're a damn idiot. Fine. If you want to fight so badly, then I'll gladly kick your ass and send you back home crying to your non-existent mommy. Kabuto simply smirked at his foe before readying himself for combat once again. Prepare yourself, Uzumaki. It's time for you to die. The end. So how was this part? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this part with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.